Good evening, and welcome to the Sleep to Lore series. Tonight, we will talk about Winter's Heart, a pivotal chapter in our journey where the seasons have shifted to a biting cold, and the very source of power is forever changed. If you'd like to support the channel, please subscribe or leave a comment. Before we begin, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to trust someone you instinctively disliked to get an important job done? Comment your answer below. Now, let us brave the snows and the darkness. Prologue. Snow. The ancient barriers holding back the eternal night are fraying, and in the dead of winter, a new darkness is prophesied to be born. It arrives not with fanfare, but on a pale horse named Death, amidst the weeping of a broken world. This is the atmosphere of dread that permeates the world, a chill that goes deeper than the snow falling over Tar Valon. Deep within the bowels of the White Tower, far below the majesty of its spires, the reality of this prophecy manifests in a stark, white basement room. Here, we witness the shattering of the tower's illusion of safety. Seanchan Herriman, a sitter for the White Arger, a woman whose life is dedicated to the cold, hard comfort of logic, finds herself trembling on the edge of hysteria. She is hunting rats, both literal and metaphorical. The physical rats, unseen in the tower for generations, are chittering in the walls, a potent symbol of the corruption that has infested the Aes Sedai. But the human rats are far more dangerous. Seanchan is not alone. She has been drawn into a clandestine cabal of sitters, Pavara of the red, Sarin of the brown, Ukiri of the grey, and Dozine of the yellow. It is a terrifying alliance, breaking centuries of tradition and protocol, driven by a singular, horrified realization. The Black Arger is real. They are no longer myths to frighten novices. They are here, and they are powerful. The focus of their desperate interrogation is Talene, a sitter for the Green Arger. The scene is visceral and disturbing. Talene is strapped into the chair of remorse, a terangrial usually reserved for punishing common criminals. It is a device of nightmares, capable of projecting convincing illusions of pain and terror directly into the mind. Under the direction of Dozine, Talene is being flayed by imaginary Trollocs and stalked by Myrddraal. It is a brutal method, highlighting a dark psychological truth about these women. When the sanctity of the tower is threatened, even the most civilized Aes Sedai will resort to torture. The dynamic here is fascinating. Sarin, the oldest and most experienced, naturally assumes command, overriding the usual fractious politics of the Arjas. Pavara, the red, wields the oath rod like a weapon. This object, the very symbol of their binding to the light, is now the instrument of their inquisition. When Talene is finally broken, weeping and terrified, she is forced to retract her oaths and re-swear them. Then comes the question that changes everything. Are you of the Black Arger? The answer, I am, marks a pivotal moment in the history of the White Tower. The denial is over. But the horror deepens. When pressed for names, Talene names the Amelin seat herself. She claims Elada is Black Arger. The psychological shockwave of this accusation is immense. The hunters are paralyzed. Logic dictates that if Elada were black, the tower is already lost. However, they reason through the fear. The Black Arger knows Elada's mind too well, suggesting not that she is one of them, but that she is surrounded by them, a puppet dancing on shadow-wrought strings. They realize they are a tiny island of light in a sea of treason. They cannot trust the Amelin, they cannot trust their sisters, and they must now use the rebels they captured earlier to expand their circle of trust. They are no longer just sitters, they are counterintelligence agents in a war they are barely beginning to understand. We shift our gaze from the claustrophobic terror of the tower to the grandeur of the royal palace in Caemlyn, though the atmosphere remains just as oppressive. Outside, a thunder snow rages, a violent, rare meteorological event that mirrors the chaos in Elaine Tracan's life. She is the daughter heir, striving to claim the Lion Throne, but her position is as precarious as a ship in that storm. Elaine is a study in the burden of leadership. She is freezing, yet she must project the warmth and stability of a queen. She sits in council with Daelin, a powerful high seat, and Birgitte, her warder and captain general. The tension in the room is palpable. Elaine proposes a radical, dangerous idea, expanding the Queen's Guard into a massive standing army, utilizing mercenaries and glory-hungry hunters for the Horn. This is a significant deviation from Andorran tradition, and it horrifies Daelin. It highlights the thematic conflict between the game of houses, the traditional political maneuvering, and the reality of the approaching last battle. Elaine knows she isn't just fighting for a crown, she is fighting to secure a nation against the Seanchan invaders and the Shadow. She is willing to risk civil war to prevent the total collapse of her realm. He is preparing to leave, playing the game of houses even as he plans to shatter the board. The psychological strain on Elaine is heavy. She relies on her bond with Birgitte to ground her, their emotions bleeding into one another, frustration, determination, and embarrassment. The political headache intensifies with the arrival of the sea folk. Renail din Cauthon and Zyda din Pered barge in, radiating arrogance and musk perfume. This interaction underscores the clash of cultures that pervades the current world. The Atha An Mier care nothing for Andorran protocol. They demand the fulfillment of their bargain with the Dragon Reborn, teachers for the One Power. Elaine, ever the diplomat, must navigate their imperious demands while hiding her own weakness. She deftly maneuvers them, playing on their internal hierarchies and the technicalities of their agreements, proving that she has learned well from the Aes Sedai game of Days Daymar. But the true threat walks through the door next. Mazrim Taim. The leader of the Black Tower enters with 2 of his Asherman, and the atmosphere in the room shifts from political tension to primal danger. Taim is a predator. He moves with the grace of a warder and the arrogance of a man who knows he wields a power that can break the world. The descriptive language here highlights the stark contrast between the feminine power of Saidar, which the women in the room embrace for protection, and the unseen, menacing void of Saidin that Taim represents. The power dynamic is electric. Taim treats the future Queen of Andor with barely veiled condescension. He mocks her attempts to control his farm, the Black Tower, where men are learning to channel. He threatens her without ever uttering a direct threat, implying that his Asherman are above the laws of kings and queens. Elaine stands her ground, refusing to be cowed, but she recognizes the existential threat Taim poses. He is a dark reflection of the Dragon Reborn, power without conscience, strength without morality. Just as the tension threatens to snap, the scene takes a sharp, ritualistic turn. Nadir, an Aiel wise one, enters. She ignores Taim entirely, dismissing his aggressive masculinity as irrelevant, and summons Elaine. The phrase, "a child waiting to be born cannot take time," is not literal but ceremonial. It signals the beginning of the first sister ritual. In a moment, Elaine is forced to shed the armour of the politician and the queen. She must leave behind the machinations of the throne, the threats of the Shadow, and the demands of the sea folk to attend to a bond of the heart. She leaves the room to become a sister to Aviendha, a transition that reminds us that amidst the crumbling seals and the riding of the black horse, the human connections between these women remain the strongest threads in the pattern. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. But in the frozen depths of the year, as the winds of winter scour the land, the pattern weaves moments of profound intimacy alongside threads of terrifying change. We begin in the royal palace of Caemlyn, where the air is stiff with tension and the cold bite of winter drafts. Elaine Trakand, daughter heir of Andor and Aes Sedai, finds herself standing on a precipice of vulnerability. She is stripping away her defences, quite literally. In a room crowded with witnesses, including the unsettling presence of Mazrim Taim and his Asherman, she is forced to disrobe. It is a moment of stark contrast, the rigid, dangerous formality of the Black Tower's leader clashing against the ancient, secretive traditions of the Aiel. Elaine's internal monologue here reveals the frantic struggle between her royal training and her human embarrassment. She attempts to retreat into the void, the Aes Sedai technique of emotional detachment, but the reality of her nakedness before Taim's predatory gaze makes tranquility impossible. She is not merely a queen or a channeler here. She is a woman exposed. Her friends and allies, Birgitte, the sea folk dignitaries, other Aes Sedai, form a living wall around her, a shield of flesh and fabric. Yet to Elaine, They seem woefully inadequate against the height and arrogance of the men. It is a scene that underscores the precarious position of women in a world where the male half of the power has returned with aggressive force. Wrapped hastily in a cloak, Elaine departs, leaving behind the political posturing for a trial of the soul. She is led by the Aiel wise one, Nadir, into the bowels of the palace. The cold of the floor tiles bites at her feet, a physical grounding for the metaphysical journey she is about to undertake. Nadir's commentary, that the public disrobing was a test of commitment, highlights the Aiel perspective. Dignity is secondary to intent. If Elaine wishes to become a first sister to Aviendha, she must value that bond above her own modesty, above her own pride, and certainly above the opinions of men. They arrive at a chamber stripped of all comforts, a white room occupied by the wise ones. Here the atmosphere shifts from political thriller to sacred ritual. Aviendha is already there, naked and nervous. The vulnerability is mutual now. This ceremony is not about the one power in the sense of combat or weaving. It is about the power of the blood and the spirit. The wise ones, including the formidable Amos and the sharp-tongued Viendra, are not here to coddle them. They are here to strip the ego to the bone. The ritual begins with a brutal honesty. The women are commanded to articulate what they love, hate, and envy in each other. This is a psychological deconstruction. Elaine admits to Aviendha's bravery and pride, while Aviendha, through the magically shared voice of the weave, confesses her admiration for Elaine's unyielding spirit. But the ceremony demands balance. They must also confess the darkness. Elaine speaks of Aviendha's childish reliance on violence, her refusal to grow up. Aviendha, in turn, cuts deep, accusing Elaine of vanity, of using her beauty to manipulate men, of a terrifying arrogance. This exchange is fascinating because it forces them to see themselves through the other's eyes. It strips away the polite fictions of friendship. The jealousy they harbour over Randall Thor is laid bare. Elaine's envy that Aviendha has slept with him, and Aviendha's crushing fear that Rand will never love her as he loves Elaine. It is raw, painful, and necessary. In the Aiel worldview, there can be no secrets between first sisters. To share a soul, one must first share the truth. Then comes the violence. The wise ones command them to strike each other. This is not a fight, it is an expiation, a clearing of toe or obligation. Elaine, hesitant at first, is forced to slap Aviendha with all her strength, and Aviendha takes the blow without defence. Then the roles reverse. They beat the resistance out of one another until they are left weeping, clinging to each other, the physical pain washing away the emotional barriers. It is a visceral reminder that love, in the wheel of time, is often forged in pain. Finally, the rebirth. The weave of the power envelops them, and the world dissolves. We enter a dreamscape of sensory deprivation and primal rhythm. The thud. The thud. They are no longer two women. They are unborn souls floating in the amniotic fluid of the power. They do not think, they exist. They are one entity, wrestling, embracing, sharing a heartbeat. This sequence is one of the most esoteric in the saga, representing a regression to the pre-conscious state. When the pressure comes, the birthing pains, it is a trauma they share. They are expelled from the womb of magic into the cold air of reality, born again as true sisters. As they lie there, slick with sweat and exhausted, the bond settles on them. It is different from the warder bond. It is deeper, a resonance of souls that ensures they will never be truly alone again. Hundreds of miles away, the atmosphere is not one of birth, but of captivity and festering resentment. We shift our gaze to the Black Tower, the headquarters of the Asherman. Toveen Ghazal, a Red Aes Sedai who came to destroy the Black Tower and found herself bonded by Logain Ablar, wakes in a cold, canvas-walled room. Her reality is a nightmare of inversion. The predator has become the prey. The Red Arger, hunters of men who channel, are now the pets of those very men. Toveen's psychological state is fragile. She lives with the constant, intrusive presence of Logain in her mind. He is a phantom limb she cannot amputate. The Black Tower itself is a place of horrifying normalcy. She walks through a village that is growing like a tumour, observing men in black coats using the one power for mundane chores, chopping wood, cleaning clothes. To an Aes Sedai trained in the sanctity and restriction of the power, this is blasphemy. But worse, there are families here, children playing, wives carrying water. It normalizes the abomination of Saidin, making the horror domestic. Tavain spots a procession and mistakes a woman for Elaine Trakand, triggering a cascade of panic and plotting. She is desperate to find a way to strike back, to escape the crushing weight of the Black Tower's growing influence. Her encounter with the local dogs and her subsequent rescue by the village women highlights her powerlessness. She, who once wielded the authority of the White Tower, is now saved by a commoner with a bucket. She meets with Gabrel, a brown Aes Sedai also captive and bonded to Logain. Gabrel represents a terrifying pragmatism. While Tavain burns with rage, Gabrel studies. She adapts. She reveals that she has allowed Logain into her bed, not out of love, but out of a calculated curiosity and a realization of the strength of the bond. Gabrel is dissecting the situation with the cold detachment of a scholar. She points out the fractures in the Black Tower, the tension between Logain's faction and Mazrim Taim's sycophants. The Brown Sister suggests a plan not of violent rebellion, which would fail, but of unity. They must organize the captive sisters, merging the fractured Arjas into a single resistance. It is a slow, quiet form of warfare, suited to the long game. As they wait for Logain, we get a glimpse of the internal politics of the Asherman. Logain is charismatic, a leader who commands respect not just through power, but through presence. Yet, cracks are appearing. News arrives of deserters, hardened men, full Ashermen like Dashiva, Torval, and Gedwin. These are Taim's men, and their disappearance is ominous. To the uninitiated, it looks like simple desertion. But to the listener aware of the broader weaving of the pattern, these names ring with danger. These are the men who have been close to the Dragon Reborn, and their flight signals a shifting of allegiances that bodes ill for the world. And speaking of the Dragon Reborn, our view shifts again, travelling on the winds to the city of Cairhien. Here, the Dragon Reborn Rand al'Thor stands at a window of the Academy, looking down at a world he is reshaping. The Academy is a hub of rediscovery, a place where the knowledge of previous ages is being clumsily glued back together. Rand watches a steam wagon, a primitive, shuddering engine that moves without horses. It is a monstrosity of noise and vibration, but it represents a future that does not rely on the one power. Rand's internal landscape is a ruin. He is physically wounded, the unhealing hurts in his side burning like a constant fire. Mentally, he is crowded. The voice of Lews Therin Telemon, the mad kinslayer of the Age of Legends, is a constant companion, raving and weeping in the back of his skull. Rand treats this madness with a terrifying familiarity, a roommate he detests but cannot evict. He speaks with Lord Debrain and the headmistress Idrian, giving orders that will secure the nations he leaves behind. He is placing his pieces, Elaine to the Lion Throne, stewardships in Cairhien and Ilion, because he knows he may not return from his next journey. There is a melancholy to Rand here. He is a builder by nature, wanting to leave behind schools and universities, steam engines and telescopes. Yet the pattern demands he be a destroyer. The voice of Lews Therin whispers of destruction, a haunting reminder that their purpose is to break the world to save it. Min Farshaw enters the scene, the grounding anchor to Rand's drifting kite. She is laden with books, the philosophy of Herod Fell. Min is the only one who sees through the myth to the man. She grumbles about the cold and the weight of the books, piercing Rand's aura of tragic nobility with sharp, loving reality. She knows he is planning something massive. She sees the leather script he guards so jealously, the one containing the Choden Kal access keys. Though she may not fully understand what they are, she knows they are the instruments of the apocalypse. Rand attempts to deceive her, to leave her behind for her own safety, but Min is immovable. She is the witness he needs, the conscience that keeps him human. They travel via gateway to a snowy forest, far from the prying eyes of spies and Forsaken. The transition hits Rand hard, a wave of nausea, a dizziness that is becoming all too frequent when he touches Saidin. This sickness is the shadow of the Dark One's taint, a physical rejection of the corruption covering the male half of the source. As they ride through the snow, Rand finally confesses his destination. He is not going to a battle of swords. He is not going to conquer another nation. He tells Min, with a flatness that belies the magnitude of the statement, that he intends to cleanse Sedin. He is going to attempt the impossible, to wipe away the Dark One's touch from the driving force of the universe. It is a task that broke the world once before. It is a task that requires him to challenge the very nature of reality. The contrast in these three narratives is striking. Elaine and Avienda seek unity through a ritual of birth, merging two souls into a bond of sisterhood to strengthen themselves for the trials ahead. Tovane and the captive Aes Sedai seek unity through political survival, trying to maintain their identity in the face of the Black Tower's overwhelming masculine dominance. And Rand, the axis around which they all spin, seeks a unity of the source itself. He seeks to heal the fundamental wound of the world, the divide between male and female, the rot that turns saviours into madmen. In the quiet of the snow-covered woods, as Rand and Min ride toward destiny, the tension is palpable. The Ashaman deserters are out there, hunting. The Forsaken are watching. The very fabric of the world is fraying. Yet there is a strange peace in the determination of the characters. Elaine has her sister, Tovane has her plan, and Rand has his impossible goal. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, and the wind blows over the black stones of the Ashaman's wall and the white tiles of the Wise One's heart, carrying the promise of a storm that will cleanse or destroy everything. Chapter 1. Leaving the Prophet. The wheel of time continues its relentless rotation, spinning out the ages. Memories degrade into legend and myth until they are lost entirely, only to be born again when the cycle repeats. In the Third Age, a wind rises not as a beginning, for the wheel possesses no true beginning or end, but as a starting point for this specific turning of events. This wind sweeps east across the Arith Ocean, pushing toward the lands of Tarabon. Here we see the immediate geopolitical impact of the Seanchan return. The harbour of Tanchico is choked with ships, signifying a boom in trade. The narrative paints a complex picture of conquest. While the Taraboners initially feared these invaders with their leashed channelers and exotic beasts, the result has been a draconian but effective order. The anarchy and starvation that once plagued the land have been crushed. It is a chilling trade-off: freedom for food, sovereignty for safety. The Seanchan nobility, the blood, remain distant overlords, and for the common farmer or craftsman, life has actually improved simply because the chaos has ceased. The wind carries us further east, across a border that now exists only on maps, into Amadisia. The Fortress of the Light in Amador now flies the Seanchan banner. The contrast here is starker. The people of Amador walk with eyes downcast, fearful of the animals they see Seanchan riding, and the sight of their former oppressors, the Children of the Light, enslaved and hauling trash. The psychological blow to Amadisia is immense. In less than 2 months, their entire worldview has been shattered, leaving them to wonder what sins brought this scourge upon them. Finally, the wind reaches the town of Abila, a place untouched by the Seanchan, but devastated by something perhaps more insidious: religious fanaticism. This is the domain of the prophet of the Lord Dragon. Perrin Aybara exits the house of Masema Dagar, the self-proclaimed prophet. The atmosphere is thick with tension. The air itself is freezing, but Perrin is insulated by a rage that burns hotter than the winter chill. We get a visceral sense of Perrin's enhanced senses here. He smells the wood smoke of the town, but underneath it, he detects the stench of old sweat and a collective, feverish madness emanating from Masema's followers. These people are a mob, armed with stolen finery and makeshift weapons, vibrating with a devotion that borders on insanity. Perrin realizes that at a single word from Masema, this crowd would tear him and his companions apart. The group accompanying Perrin highlights the fragile coalition he is forced to maintain. He has Ashaman, Aes Sedai, and Wise Ones of the Aiel all in tow. The tension between these groups is palpable. The Wise Ones, Edara and Karel, treat the Aes Sedai, Sionid and Masuri, like apprentices, a complete inversion of the power dynamic the Tower Witches are used to. Perrin has achieved his immediate goal. Masema has agreed to travel to meet Rand. However, the Prophet refuses to use the One Power for travel, viewing it as blasphemy for anyone but the Dragon Reborn. This forces a grueling overland journey of hundreds of leagues. It is a logistical nightmare, but one Perrin must accept to fulfill his duty. As they ride out of Abila, the poverty and desperation of the prophet's followers are evident. There are no children or dogs to be seen, a grim implication of starvation. Once clear of the town, Bulwer, Perrin's secretary and spy master, reveals intelligence that recontextualizes the world around them. He reports that the Amadishian army has been utterly destroyed by the Seanchan at the Battle of Jeromel. King Aelron is captured, and the nobility of Amadishia is effectively extinct. Furthermore, the White Cloaks have been scattered, though the High Inquisitor Valda managed to escape with a portion of their strength. This confirms that the Seanchan are a juggernaut that cannot be ignored. However, Bulwer also notes that the Seanchan suffered a defeat in Altara, apparently pushed back by a force wielding the One Power. This chapter sets a tone of impending dread. Perrin watches a hawk soaring in the sky, his thoughts drifting to his wife, Faile. He resolves to put aside thoughts of empires and armies to focus on her. It is a moment of quiet longing that serves as a tragic prelude to the catastrophe awaiting him. Chapter 2. Taken. The narrative shifts from the political to the personal, and the pacing accelerates from a slow march to a frantic scramble. Perrin returns to his camp in the forest, expecting a routine reunion. Instead, he finds a powder keg ready to explode. The camp is in disarray. The Maena-winged guards and the Gjeldanin lancers are drawn up in battle formations, not against an external enemy, but facing off against the Two Rivers archers and the Aiel Wise Ones. It is a standoff born of panic and mistrust. Perrin charges into the centre of this chaos. He finds Berelen, the First of Mayenne, trying to mediate between her own captain, Galen, and the furious Gjeldanin commander, Gerard Arganda. The revelation hits Perrin with the force of a physical blow. Faile has been taken. While hunting with Queen Aleandra and Berelen, they were ambushed by Aiel. Berelen escaped, but Faile and the Queen did not. Here, we witness the duality of Perrin's nature, the man and the wolf. His immediate internal reaction is a primal scream. The text describes his chest feeling bound with iron straps, a panic that threatens to send him howling into the woods. He reaches out with his mind to the wolves in the area, desperate for information. The wolves confirm the tragedy. They offer their sympathy for the loss of his she, but they have no specific location, having steered clear of the human conflict. They offer him the cold comfort of the wolf dream to meet her again, implying they believe she may already be dead. However, the human side of Perrin the Lord must take charge. He suppresses the panic, burying it under a layer of cold, hard duty. He realizes that if he gives in to rage, his coalition will fracture. Arganda is ready to slaughter the Aiel in Perrin's camp out of misplaced vengeance. Perrin forcefully asserts his authority, reminding Arganda that his fealty to Aleandra transfers to Perrin in her absence. It is a command delivered with the edge of an axe. He dispatches his best trackers, the wolf brother Elias Machera and the Aiel Gaul, to find the trail. The weather is turning against them, snow is falling, threatening to cover the tracks.
Perrin's interaction with the Aiel Wise Ones is telling. They have retreated into their tents, secretive and unbothered by the chaos. When Perrin tries to demand answers about how the renegade Shaido Aiel treat captives, Neverim blocks him. She offers no false hope, warning him that while custom forbids harming captives, the Shaido have abandoned many customs. She essentially tells him to pull himself together or get drunk, because hysteria will not help. The chapter ends in a quiet, agonizing vigil. The camp settles into a tense rhythm of waiting. Perrin stands on a ridge with Talonvor, the Queen's guardsman who is in love with Faile's maid, Maegdin. They are two men united by loss, staring into the falling snow as darkness consumes the forest. The imagery of the moon being swallowed by clouds mirrors Perrin's internal state. The light of his life has been snatched away, leaving him in a cold, dark void. Chapter 3. Customs. The perspective shifts to Faile, plunging us into the brutal reality of captivity. This chapter is a study in survival psychology and the harsh, alien culture of the Aiel. Faile and her companions, including Queen Aleandra and the maid Maegdin, are being force-marched through the snow. They have been stripped of their clothes, leaving them naked or near naked in the freezing weather. This is not merely for the sake of cruelty, but serves a dual purpose. It humiliates the prisoners, reinforcing their helplessness, and it pragmatically prevents escape, as fleeing into the snow without clothing is a death sentence. We see Faile's incredible mental fortitude here. While she is physically suffering, her feet cut by ice, her body nearing hypothermia, her mind remains a tactical engine. She is constantly analysing her captors, the Shaido, and their brotherless allies, the Meridine. She focuses on the mechanics of walking to keep the cold at bay. She understands that dignity is a luxury she cannot afford if she wants to survive. This contrasts sharply with Alejandra and Maegdin. They fight against their captors, biting and struggling. While their spirit is admirable, Faile recognises it as foolishness. Their resistance earns them a public switching, a brutal punishment that wastes precious energy and delays the group, endangering everyone's lives. Faile views this with a cold pragmatism. She feels no sympathy, only irritation that their pride is reducing the group's odds of survival. Eventually, the cold overcomes Faile. She is carried by a massive Shaido warrior named Roland. The text presents a complex dynamic here. Roland treats her like a piece of baggage or a pony, smacking her to keep her still, yet he is also the source of warmth that keeps her alive. Faile hallucinates as hypothermia sets in, dreaming of Perrin and fire, her mind retreating to safety as her body shuts down. She wakes up in a temporary camp. The situation has changed. She is wrapped in blankets, and a Gaishain, a white-robed Aiel servant, is feeding her hot tea. The dialogue here is crucial for understanding Aiel lore. The Gaishain explains that the prisoners were wrapped in the Aiel's own coats because the wetlanders were deemed too weak to survive the cold without them. To the Aiel, this is a matter of shame. The prisoners were so fragile, they forced their captors to break the norm of nudity for captives. It illustrates the twisted, rigid honour code of the brotherless. They will enslave you, but they won't let you freeze if it implies they are poor custodians. The chapter concludes with a devastating realisation. As Faile's senses return, she looks past her immediate captors. She sees not a small raiding party, but a flood of humanity. Thousands of Aiel, wagons and herds are moving through the forest. She has not been taken by a splinter group, she is in the clutches of the entire Shaido migration. The scale of the problem shifts from a rescue mission to a war. Perrin is not chasing a few bandits. He is chasing an army that rivals the population of a large city. Faile realises that escape will require more than just slipping away. It will require navigating a society she barely understands, surrounded by tens of thousands of enemies. Chapter 4. Offers. The biting cold of the waste has followed the Shaido north, manifesting now as a relentless swirling snow that carpets the world in white. We find Faile Aybara kneeling in this frozen landscape, her mind momentarily drifting from survival to the simple, desperate desire for hot tea. But the reality of her captivity is about to march out of the blizzard. 3 figures emerge from the whiteout. 2 are wise ones, radiating an aura of stone-hard authority, dragging a stumbling Gaishain between them. The contrast here is immediate and jarring, a visual representation of how twisted the Shaido clan has become. The prisoner in white, struggling through the deep drifts, is wearing the forbidden. Gaishain are meant to be humble, stripped of all worldly possessions, yet this woman is cinched in a belt of gold and fire drops, a collar of immense wealth choking her neck. It is a grotesque display, a violation of Giotto that screams of one person's vanity. Savannah. Faile watches them with the instincts of a hunter. She identifies the wise ones not by their clothes, but by their presence. There is Tharava, an eagle-eyed woman of iron discipline, and Summarin, tall and oddly voluptuous for a wise one, exposing skin to the freezing air to display her own heavy necklaces. They are joined by the architect of this chaos, Savannah herself, riding a horse, another break from Aiel custom, and draped in wetlander silks and jewels. This scene is a masterclass in the corruption of culture. Savannah is trying to force the square peg of wetlander nobility into the round hole of Aiel hierarchy. She inspects Faile, Queen Alejandra, and Maegdin with the cold, assessing eye of a livestock merchant. She isn't looking for honour, she is looking for leverage. We see the terrifying reality of the Aes Sedai prisoner, Galina Kazban. Once a leader of the Red Arja, a woman who commanded kings, she is now reduced to a whimpering creature, eager to please her captors. When Tharava commands her to heal the prisoners so they can walk, Galena obeys with a sickening mixture of fear and eagerness. It is a psychological breaking point, showing us that even the White Tower's strongest can be dismantled by the sheer brutality of the Wise One's discipline. The healing is administered, a washing away of physical pain that leaves the prisoners ravenous and exhausted. But the Shaido are not done with their humiliations. Faile and her companions are forced to don the white robes of the Gaishain, but with a twist. They are compelled to wear golden belts and collars. It is a branding, marking them as the personal property of Savannah, decorative dolls in her twisted court. As they trudge through the snow, part of a massive migrating city of Shaido, the internal politics of the clan begin to tighten around Faile's throat. Tharava, the eagle-eyed traditionalist who hates what Savannah is doing, yet supports the clan, corners the three women. She sees through their meek facades. She knows they have spirit, and she weaponizes it. Tharava offers a chilling deal. Serve as spies. They are to report every word Savannah says, every move she makes. If they refuse, or if Savannah finds out, Tharava promises a slow, agonizing death. It is a rock and a hard place. Faile realizes that the Shaido leadership is fracturing, a nest of vipers biting at each other, and she is stuck in the middle. But the web grows more complex. As they march, the broken Aes Sedai, Galena, approaches them. She has deduced who Faile is, the wife of Perrin Aybara. To Galena, this is currency. She reveals her own desperation, her own secret agenda. She is bound not just by captivity, but by the oath rod, a smooth white rod Tharava keeps in a red chest. Galena cannot touch it herself. The compulsion is too strong. She blackmails Faile. Steal the rod, break the binding, and Galena will help them escape. If not, she will reveal Faile's identity to Savannah, who would use Perrin as bait for the dragon reborn. Faile is left trudging through the blizzard, burdened not just by the golden collar of servitude, but by 3 layers of lethal intrigue. She must play the servant, the spy for Tharava, and the thief for Galena, all while hiding her true name. The trap has snapped shut, but Faile is a falcon, and falcons have sharp talons. She begins to plan, her mind working through the exhaustion, looking for the weakness in the snare. Chapter 5. Flags. We shift from the cold reality of the waking world to the perilous, shifting landscape of Teleran Riod, the world of dreams. But this is not a dream of peace. It is a hunt. Perrin Aybara is running. He is not entirely a man here. He is young bull, forepaws driving through deep phantom snow, his mind submerged in the wolf. He is hunting for the scent of his mate, the falcon. The desperation is palpable. He is pushing himself beyond endurance, blurring the line between the man who loves his wife and the wolf that lives for the hunt. Hopper, his ancient guide and friend, intervenes. The grizzled wolf warns him that he is fading, that he is too present in the dream and absent from his body. To stay is to die. There is a tragic beauty in this struggle. Perrin is willing to tear his own soul apart to find Faile, lashing out even at Hopper in his grief-stricken madness. But the old wolf forces him out, banishing him back to the world of flesh and blood to save him from himself. Perrin wakes with a gasp, the transition jarring. He is no longer in the snowy waste of the dream, but in a warm, dimly lit tent, smelling of charcoal and heavy perfume. The hollowness inside him is immense, a physical void left by Faile's absence and the energy drain of the dream. He finds himself in the care of Berelain, the first of Mayene. The dynamic here is thick with tension. Berelain has been watching over him while he slept the sleep of the near-dead, healed by the Aes Sedai Anora. Berelain's presence is complex. She is a political creature, calculating and ambitious, yet there is a genuine layer of concern, or perhaps just a recognition of Perrin's value. She informs him that his scouts were ambushed and killed. The news gets worse. The prophet Mesema has arrived, not with a small honor guard, but with a swarm of thousands. And more disturbing still, Mesema has been meeting with the Seanchan. This revelation adds a terrifying new dimension to the board. The prophet, a madman obsessed with the dragon, treating with the invaders from across the ocean. It suggests a chaotic alignment that could destabilize the entire region. Perrin, however, can barely process the geopolitics. He is a man carved out of numbness. He dresses with mechanical movements, ignoring Berelain's blatant flirtations and her offers of a truce and comfort. He sees her manoeuvring, her implications that they are close, the way she allows her servants to giggle and spread rumours of an affair, but he is too exhausted, too focused on the hole in his heart, to fight it with his usual vigour. He just wants his wife. He leaves the cloying warmth of Berelain's tent for the biting cold of the morning. The camp is a scene of organised waiting. The Mayoners, the Gildanin, and the rough-hewn men of the two rivers are all there, enduring the snow. But the atmosphere is heavy. The scouts haven't returned. There is no sign of Faile. Perrin trudges through the snow, his mood blacker than the storm clouds. He reaches his own camp, where the banners hang limp in the falling snow, the red eagle of Manetheren and his own wolf head. These symbols, once sources of pride or annoyance, now feel like heavy burdens. He had planned to move swiftly, to use the chaos of the world as cover, perhaps even letting the world believe the lie of Manetheren reborn, if it helped him move freely. But as he looks at the banners and the waiting men, the realization settles on him like a lead weight. The time for hiding is over. The game has changed. With the Shaido in force, Masema's unpredictable army nearby, and the Seanchan lurking in the shadows, he cannot simply slip away. To get Faile back, he will have to pay a price. He will have to become the lord these banners proclaim him to be, and he will have to wield that power with a ruthlessness he has always tried to avoid. The Wolf King is rising, not out of ambition, but out of necessity and grief. The hunt is no longer just a chase, it is a war. Chapter 6. The Scent of Madness. The snow fell with a relentlessness that seemed to mock the urgency burning in Perrin Aybara's veins. He moved through the camp, a man haunted, pushing between the huddled horses to find Dan'l. The reaction of the two rivers' men told a story of its own. They backed away, averting their gaze, hiding within their cowls. It wasn't just respect. It was an uncomfortable mixture of sympathy and fear. They saw a man walking on the edge of a precipice, and they did not know if he would fall or fly. Perrin fought a yawn that threatened to crack his jaw. His body screamed for sleep, a primal demand he had to ignore. The goose-brained rumours had been true. Masema's people were gathering like scavengers. Dan'l confirmed they were flocking to the waterwood, looking, as he put it, ready to skin their own mothers. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to taste. These men were ready for violence, eager to vent their frustration on the Prophet's mob, especially after hearing how Berelain's men had been butchered. But Perrin, ever the reluctant general, had to hold them back. He needed order, not a brawl. He issued his commands with a grim finality. They would move south. He had delayed too long, paralysed by the unknown, but now the decision was made. They would ride, and then the Asherman, Grady or Neild, would open a gateway. It was a terrifying power to rely on, but necessity had stripped away Perrin's hesitation. He ordered scouts and flankers, his mind working through the tactical nightmare. He had to assume enemies were everywhere, not just the renegade Aiel who had taken Faile, but perhaps the Gildanin under Arganda, whose loyalty hung by a thread. As Dan'l moved to execute the orders, Perrin felt the crushing weight of leadership. He was Lord Perrin to them, a title that felt like a shackle. He caught Kenly Mairen to call for Stepper, suppressing a growl at the boy's nervous reverence. Inside, Perrin was a storm of frustration. He felt the chasm widening between himself and the simple blacksmith he used to be, a distance that terrified him more than any battle. Master Gil approached, city-bred and shivering, clutching his hat. He brought news of Talonvor, who had ridden out alone in a desperate, foolish attempt to find Maegdin. Perrin felt a flash of kinship with the man. Talonvor was a hare chasing weasels, yes, but Perrin understood that madness. He wanted to be riding with him. He wanted to abandon the army, the responsibility, and just be a husband searching for his wife. But he couldn't. He had to be the lord. The camp was a symphony of misery. Linny, the ancient nursemaid, stood her ground like a withered oak in a gale, wielding a cudgel and a sharp tongue. She snapped about empty kettles and bellyaches, her way of coping with the terror of Maegdin's disappearance. But the gossip mill was grinding even here. Jill, stammering and awkward, revealed that Linny had spoken to the Mayoners. The rumour was that Perrin had slept in Berelain's tent. The injustice of it burned. He had done nothing but sleep, yet the stain of impropriety was spreading. In the Two Rivers, such a reputation was a brand that didn't fade. He saw the way his men looked at him now, the spitting, the averted eyes. They thought he had betrayed Faile. The irony was bitter as gall. The only person who would truly believe his innocence was the woman who was missing. He found himself accosted by the Faile, the young nobles who had sworn themselves to his wife. They were a peacock display of Aiel appropriation and high-born arrogance, led by Seanchan. They demanded horses, their scents radiating petulance and sullied pride. Perrin's patience, worn thin by fear and sleeplessness, finally snapped. He loomed over them, his anger a physical force, accusing them of spying, of endangering Faile. It was a lash of raw emotion, unfair but uncontrollable. He needed a target, and they were there. Yet even in his rage, he extracted a promise of obedience. They would wait. As the column prepared to move, a shout went up. Aiel were coming. Panic rippled through the ranks. Bows were drawn, but Perrin's enhanced vision cut through the falling snow. It was Sulin and the scouts. They were leading Aleandra's horse. There was a bundle on the saddle. The dread that seized Perrin's heart was absolute. He walked forward, his legs numb, his mind recoiling from what he might find. Sulin met him, her face scarred and leathery, and handed him a bundle of dark blue cloth. "Good news, Perrin Aybara," she said, though the warders behind her looked grim. "Your wife lives." He let the bundle fall open. It was Faile's dress, sliced cleanly from her body. He buried his face in it, inhaling the scent of flowery soap and the essence that was simply her. There was no blood. The relief was a physical blow, nearly knocking him to his knees, but it was quickly followed by a cold realization. The cuts were precise. The maidens explained the Aiel custom of Gaishain. They had been taken as meek ones, servants forbidden to touch a weapon or be touched by violence. It was a protection of sorts. But who were these Aiel? Sunin revealed the terrifying truth in the snow. She dropped arrows she had recovered. Tardad, Goshian, Miagoma. But then she spilled the rest. Shaido. The name hit Perrin like a hammer. The Shaido clan was supposed to be hundreds of leagues away, bottled up by the dragon reborn. But here they were, in Amadicia, and there were thousands of them. Sulin produced a child's doll found in the snow, evidence of families, of septs on the move. And there was more. Strange tracks, ribbed wings in the sky, Seanchan beasts. The puzzle pieces clicked together in Perrin's exhausted mind, forming a picture of absolute chaos. A massive Shaido force, moving south to meet others, trailed by Seanchan scouts or perhaps an army. He was riding into the jaws of hell. "We go south," Perrin said, his voice flat. He had to coordinate the movement, order the travelling, but before he could depart, the birdsong of the forest changed. A warning trill. Out of the trees rode the prophet, Masema. He came with 100 men, but his presence outweighed them all. His eyes were burning coals of zealotry, staring out from a cowl that hid a shaved head. He reeked of madness, a scent that twisted in Perrin's nose, sharp and disturbing. Perrin prepared for violence. He told Masema to go east, that he was going south to rescue Faile. He expected resistance, a sermon, perhaps a battle. Instead, Masema smiled, a cold, terrifying expression. "I will come with you," the madman declared. He viewed killing Aiel as the light's work, but more than that, he offered a chilling justification. He claimed a dispensation from the Lord Dragon Reborn. Because Perrin was the dragon's friend, the prophet would aid him. Perrin stared at the fanatic. The idea of this rabble marching with him was a nightmare, yet he had no energy to argue. He lied, saying he would appreciate the help, hoping to travel away before Masema could follow. But the encounter left him cold. Masema's madness was a variable he couldn't control, and now it was pointed in the same direction as his heart, toward Faile. Chapter 7. The Streets of Camelin. Elaine Tracand rode through the streets of her capital, a calculated display of power and presence. The golden lily on her crimson cloak and the rose on her coronet were not just ornaments. They were political statements. She needed the people of Caemlyn to see her, to know that the daughter heir had returned and that House Tracand held the city. The city was a living thing, recovering from the shock of occupation. The streets were cleared of snow, bustling with a population swollen by refugees and merchants, yet the reception was lukewarm. There were stares, certainly, and the occasional shout of "Tracand!" but the roaring adulation of the past was missing. Elaine understood the precariousness of her position. She held the stone and mortar of Caemlyn, but she did not yet hold its heart. And without the heart, the throne was just a chair. Her entourage was a reflection of the new world she navigated. She was flanked by her guardswomen, a break from tradition, 8 women in breastplates and helmets, led by the tough Arafelin Cassay. There was Saritha, a brown sister who looked like a merchant, but watched with the sharp eyes of the White Tower, and her warder, Ned Yarman, a beacon of Aes Sedai power. Saritha's voice cut through the street noise, warning Elaine of the danger. With 10 sisters at the Silver Swan Inn, potentially sent by Aleida, the threat of kidnapping was real. Elaine dismissed the fear outwardly, though internally she knew the risk. She refused to be a prisoner in her own palace. She had to be seen. If she hid, she lost. The ride was an education in demographics. She saw the foreign faces, Damani, Ileana's, Tyrans, and the refugees, hollow-eyed and broken. She saw the mercenaries, dangerous men looking for coin, who might become the army she needed, or the sword that struck her down. And she felt the presence of her bonded sisters. Avienda was somewhere in the city, a comforting hum in the back of her mind, and Bajit was angry. The bond transmitted a wave of fury that preceded the warder herself. Bajit Silverbow, hero of the Horn and now Captain General, came galloping up Pierman's Lane, scattering pedestrians. She brought news that shattered the morning's calm. The escort bringing the rival claimants, Nian and Elenia, had been ambushed. 10 men dead, the prisoners gone. The political landscape shifted violently. Elaine's mind raced through the possibilities. If Jared Sarand had taken them, he held the keys to a powerful alliance against Tracand. He could force Nian's support or kill her. It was a disaster. But the immediate conflict was personal. Birgitte was furious at Elaine's refusal to have a personal bodyguard. The argument was a clash of wills and roles. Birgitte, the ancient soldier, saw the tactical stupidity of a queen riding exposed. Elaine, the politician and Aes Sedai, saw the necessity of projecting confidence. Queens don't go running off to do everything themselves, Birgitte snapped, her braids swinging. She dismantled Elaine's guilt over the ambush with brutal logic. Even a full garrison might not have stopped a determined attack, and stripping Arengil would have left the east vulnerable. It was a good plan that had simply failed. Saritha watched the exchange with the detached curiosity of a scholar studying a new species of insect. She injected her own commentary, praising Elaine's deduction of the political fallout, while subtly reinforcing Birgitte's concerns about safety. It was a dance of power, the Aes Sedai trying to manage the queen, the warder trying to protect the woman. The ride back to the palace was sombre. Elaine's thoughts churned with the complexities of the succession. She had to secure the throne, manage the Aes Sedai in the city, find the coin to pay her troops, and somehow keep the high houses from tearing Andor apart. They entered the palace through the rear, the steel-shod hooves ringing on the stone. The mood in the stable yard was tense. Rumours of the ambush had already spread. Men stood straighter, eyes darting to the Captain General's thunderous expression. As they moved into the palace corridors, the tension between Elaine and Birgitte flared again. Elaine tried to exert her authority, chiding Birgitte for her rough language, trying to pull rank. "I saddled you with a title," Elaine noted, wondering if she had hoped to tame the hero. Birgitte turned, her voice soft and dangerous. She reminded Elaine that she was never goggle-eyed, like the new warder, Yarman. She didn't jump when fingers were snapped. "We'll have a good long talk tonight, my lady." The title was delivered with a formal bow that bordered on mockery. Birgitte stalked off, leaving Elaine fuming. Elaine stood alone in the hallway, a queen surrounded by servants but isolated by power. She caught a young boy gawking at her and sent him scurrying with a message, her paranoia flaring briefly. Was he a spy? Or just a boy? The weight of the crown pressed down on her. She had to be strong. She had to be clever, and in a city of spies, rivals, and ancient friends who wouldn't obey, she had to figure out who she could trust to help her hold the Lion Throne. Chapter 8. Sea Folk and Kin. The burden of leadership often arrives not with the thunder of drums or the clash of steel, but in the quiet, rustling steps of a servant before dawn. For Elaine Trakand, heir to the Lion Throne, the reality of ruling Andor is a tapestry woven as much from mundane accounts as it is from grand political manoeuvring. As she navigates the corridors of the royal palace in Caemlyn, she is intercepted by Reen Harfor, the first maid. Mistress Harfor is a woman of formidable presence, her scarlet tabard crisp, the white lion of Andor standing stark against her chest. In the psychology of the palace, Harfor is the unsung castellan. She maintains a discipline that rivals the military precision of Gareth Bryn. She is the eyes and ears of the domestic sphere, a reminder that a kingdom is only as strong as the loyalty of those who sweep its floors. Harfor brings news of spies, a pair of servants from Morghase's reign who fled rather than face questioning. It is a subtle game of cat and mouse. Elaine realizes that offering amnesty, while necessary to prevent civil war, allows rats to hide in the grain barns. The shadow of her mother Morghase hangs heavy here. Morghase had been betrayed by those she forgave. Elaine determines to learn from that history, understanding that mercy without vigilance is merely an invitation for treason. But the duties of a daughter heir are relentless. Harfor lists the day's adversaries, not armies, but a petitioning delegation of tabak merchants, weavers seeking tax relief, and the palace accounts. There is a grim humour in the fact that the greatest threat to Elaine's afternoon is not a dark friend, but weevils in the flour and spoiling hams. It grounds the high fantasy of the Wheel of Time in the gritty logistical reality that Robert Jordan so masterfully portrays. Armies must eat, and queens must sign the receipts. Moving through the palace, the complexities of Elaine's alliances become visible. The corridors are a crowded intersection of cultures, the Aes Sedai, the rigorous kinswomen, and the haughty sea folk windfinders. It is a volatile mixture. Elaine encounters Vandene of the Green Arja, who looks less like an ageless sister and more like an implacable judge, her grief over her murdered sister Adelius etched into her bones. Vandene is trailed by two novices, Kirstian and Zarya. These are not children, but kinswomen, hundreds of years old in truth, forced back into the humble white of the novitiate. There is a profound psychological strain here. These women, who lived free for centuries, are now bound by the tower's rigid hierarchy, terrified of the discipline awaiting them. Yet, they have sharp minds. They have deduced a terrifying truth that the Aes Sedai have tried to suppress. The murderer at Harlon Bridge was not a bandit, but a black sister, one of the Aes Sedai currently in their company. It is a chilling realization that the danger is not outside the walls, but sleeping in the next room. Nynaeve Alniara joins them, bringing her own brand of chaotic order. Wearing the kisane of a married Malkieri woman and radiating the frustration of a healer forced to be a diplomat, Nynaeve cuts through the Aes Sedai protocol. She forces Vandene to take the two kinswomen as students, effectively weaponizing their knowledge while keeping them under watch. Looming silently nearby is Lan Mandragoran. The uncrowned king of Malkia moves like a ghost, his cold blue eyes scanning for threats. There is a beautiful, understated intimacy in how his lethal vigilance serves as a silent declaration of love for Nynaeve. He is the lion watching over the lioness. Elaine and Nynaeve then proceed to a small, stuffy room to witness a darker struggle. Here, Rianne and Elise are conducting a psychological siege against captured Seanchan Suldam. This is one of the most thematically dense conflicts in the series. The Suldam, women who leash channelers, are being forced to confront the reality that they themselves can channel. It is a dismantling of their entire worldview. Rianne uses the power to block sound, demonstrating her ability, while the Suldam weep in denial. They are trapped in a cognitive dissonance so severe they would rather be enslaved than admit they are identical to the domain they despise. The decision is made to remove the Adam collars from the captive domain, a risky gambit to prove to the Suldam that they are all the same. It is a moment of moral complexity. To break the Seanchan conditioning, Elaine and Nynaeve must act as jailers, stripping away the lies of the Empire layer by painful layer. Chapter 9. A Cup of Tea. Elaine retreats to her apartments, shedding her riding leathers for the silken armour of the court. She dresses in fine blue wool patterned with seed pearls, a visual assertion of her status. The clothing in this world is never just decoration, it is a language of power. She cannot yet wear the rose crown, but she must look the part of the queen, or no one will follow her. She is immediately accosted by Halwyn Norrie, the first clerk. If Harfor is the palace's shield, Norrie is its ledger. He is a dry, heron-like man who speaks of alum deposits and bank loans with a monotone gravity. Yet his news is vital. He reveals that the White Tower, fractured under Elada, has issued a proclamation demanding the Dragon Reborn accept their protection. It is a stunning display of arrogance that Elaine knows Rand will reject. There is a subtle tension in this meeting. Norrie serves Elaine, but his loyalty is to the stability of Andor. He reports on the chaos of the world, armies in Ilion, silence from the borderlands, and the political manoeuvring of King Rodrin in Morandi, as if discussing the weather. Elaine navigates this conversation with a growing deftness, balancing the need for coin against the need for political caution. She realizes she is beginning to sound like her mother, a comparison that brings both pride and a shiver of dread. She is walking the same path that led Morghese to ruin, hoping her footing is surer. Finally, Elaine is granted a moment of respite. A midday meal is laid out for her, rich meats, soups and sweets, but she has little appetite. She opts for simple broth and tea. It is a quiet domestic scene, a brief exhale in a life held breathless by duty. But the peace is shattered by the arrival of Dyelin, a high noble and loyal ally. Dyelin bursts in with alarming news. A massive army of Borderlanders has been spotted in Brame Wood, deep inside Andor. It is an inexplicable manoeuvre, a displacement of forces that suggests the last battle is destabilizing the very geography of alliances. As Elaine tries to process this, sipping her tea, the world suddenly tilts. The taste is cool and minty, the signature flavour of forkroot. The realization hits her with the slow, terrifying inevitability of a nightmare. Forkroot is the bane of channelers, a herb that deadens the mind and severs the connection to the one power. Elaine tries to embrace Saidar, to fill herself with the life force that is her greatest weapon, but she grasps at nothing. Her mind feels stuffed with wool. The trap has sprung not with a bang, but with a sip. The door opens. These are not servants, they are men with cold eyes and drawn daggers. The transition from political discussion to visceral violence is instantaneous. Dyelin, realizing the betrayal, fights with the ferocity of a lioness, hurling a chair and drawing her belt knife. But these are professionals. The choreography of the violence is brutal and efficient. Dyelin is slashed and falls. Elaine, her limbs heavy as lead, her connection to the power severed, draws her own small, pearl-handled dagger. It is a pitiful defence against trained assassins, yet the spirit of the Trakand line holds her upright. She refuses to die like a kitten in a sack. The assassin approaches, his blue eyes studying her with a detached, professional curiosity, wondering perhaps if the poison has finished the job. Just as the blade is poised to strike, the assassin stops. A foot of steel bursts from his chest. He falls, revealing a sword hilt in his back. The room descends into a blur of blood and motion as a man in a guardsman's coat engages the remaining killers. Elaine's consciousness begins to spiral away. The mundane concerns of weevils, the high politics of the White Tower, and the complex morality of the Seanchan all dissolve into the singular, terrifying darkness of the drug. She falls, her fate resting in the hands of a stranger, as the silence of the forkroot claims her. Chapter 10. A plan succeeds. The narrative opens in the disorientation of consciousness returning. Elaine Trakand wakes not to light, but to a suffocating darkness, and the sensory confusion of a body in shock, her face cold, her limbs feverishly hot and restrained. For a channeler, there is a specific primal terror in being physically helpless, a fear that echoes the severance from the one power itself. But before panic can fully take root, the metaphysical lifeline of the warder bond anchors her. She senses Avienda's solid, comforting presence and Bagheet's emotional signature, a knot of controlled, seething fury. This connection serves as a psychological grounding wire, reminding us that in this world, intimacy is often shared directly mind to mind, bypassing the need for spoken reassurance. Elaine is safe in her own bed, covering from the effects of forkroot tea, a substance that effectively neuters a channeler's ability to touch the source. It is a violation that leaves a deeper scar than physical injury. Her first instinct upon waking is to reach for Saidar, not to wield it, but simply to confirm it is still there. The fear of being stilled, of being cut off from the universal driving force of creation, is a trauma that haunts every Aes Sedai and initiate. Nynaeve Almiara steps from the shadows, her demeanour shifting between healer and fussing older sister. We see here the limitations of the one power. Nynaeve, despite her legendary strength, could not heal the effects of forkroot because she did not understand the weave required to counter it. Instead, she resorted to traditional herb lore, greenwort and goat's tongue, to manage the symptoms. It is a moment that highlights Nynaeve's pragmatic roots as a wisdom. When the White Tower's magic fails, the Two Rivers' earthiness prevails. The attempted kidnapping was brutal in its complexity. It wasn't merely an abduction, it was an assassination attempt involving poison-laced daggers. Birgitte, ever the soldier, breaks down the tactical reality. 3 attackers, one bearing a blade coated in grey fennel and peach pit, a lethal cocktail designed to kill with a scratch. The rescue, apparently, came from a man named Doylin Meller, a mercenary who supposedly stumbled upon the scene and dispatched the assassins with the flair of a Gleeman's hero, hurling a sword like a spear. Here, Robert Jordan employs a thick, suffocating layer of dramatic irony. Elaine and Birgitte, usually so politically astute, decide to reward this hero. Elaine insists on promoting Mellar to captain of her personal bodyguard. The title of the chapter, A Plan Succeeds, begins to take on a sinister double meaning. Elaine believes her plan for safety is succeeding, unaware that she is inviting the fox directly into the henhouse. The social dynamics in the room shift. Avienda and Birgit have formed a protective pact around Elaine, yet they bicker with the familiarity of siblings. Nynaeve, however, is changing. She commands the room with a newfound imperiousness, silencing Birgit, a woman who has lived hundreds of lives, with a mere look. The influence of Lan Mandragoran and the weight of her own growing power are forging Nynaeve into a formidable, if arrogant, force. Despite the physical trauma, the work of the world does not stop. Elaine uses a twisted stone ring Terangrial to project her consciousness into Teleran Riod, the world of dreams. The transition is jarring. She finds herself in the reflection of the Grand Hall of Caemlyn. The world of dreams is a place where subconscious thought manifests as reality. We see Elaine's deep-seated reverence for her lineage, as she hallucinates past queens judging her from the stained glass windows. She mentally adjusts her clothing, her self-image flickering between royal splendour and sea-folk garb, revealing her internal struggle between her duty as heir and her desire for freedom. She is joined by Nynaeve and Egwene. The visual contrast between the 3 women in the dream world is a masterclass in character study. Egwene, now the Amelin seat, possesses an ironclad will. Her image remains stable, her clothes unchanging. She has mastered the dream because she has mastered herself. Nynaeve, conversely, is a chaotic storm of insecurity. Her dress shifts frantically from sturdy wool to Tarrabona silk, her subconscious betraying her lack of inner peace. The conversation turns to the kin. Egwene, hardening into her role as leader of the White Tower, delivers a chilling ultimatum. The kin must be brought into the fold, and they will swear on the oath rod. The horror of this realization ripples through Elaine and Nynaeve. Swearing the 3 oaths cuts a channeler's lifespan in half. Egwene is effectively sentencing women who might live 600 years, like the reclusive Aloysia Nemosny, to a premature death for the sake of political cohesion. It is a ruthless calculation, shows how far Egwene has moved from the village girl she once was. She is now the Amelin first, and a friend second. Their clandestine meeting is interrupted. A man appears in the dream, a figure with a familiar hardness, possibly resembling Rand, before vanishing. Then the ominous click of a latch signals they are not alone. The world of dreams, once their private sanctuary, has become a contested territory filled with eavesdroppers. The shadow of paranoia lengthens. Nowhere is safe. The perspective violently shifts, taking us from the high politics of the protagonists to the squalid, terrifying reality of the Black Arger. We find Asna, Chesmal, Eldrith, and the sadistic Tamali hiding in a house in Camelin. The atmosphere is claustrophobic, filled with the petty bickering of evil. These are not grand villains, but frightened women lashing out. Tamali, however, represents a darker breed. She fondles a glass bracelet to Rangrial and speaks of torturing Nynaeve with a glint of madness in her eyes. They are aware of the girls in the palace. They are hunting. Finally, we move to the Lady Shiain, the dark friend formerly known as Millie Skane. She operates with a cold, terrifying efficiency that contrasts with the Black Arger's incompetence. She holds the leash of the Black Sisters, using the authority of the Forsaken Moradin to cow them. The chapter concludes with the arrival of her confederate, David Hanlon. The circle of irony snaps shut with a devastating click. Hanlon enters, wearing the red coat and golden knots of an officer. He grins, revealing the terrible truth of the chapter's title. The plan that succeeded was not Elaine's rescue, but the Shadow's infiltration. Hanlon announces that he has been named the captain of the Queen's bodyguard. He is Doylin Meller. The man Elaine has just entrusted with her life is an agent of the dark, positioned at her right hand by her own decree. The trap is set, and the key has been turned from the inside. Chapter 11. Ideas of Importance. The gateway opened not into a place of glory, but into the dusty gloom of a forgotten storeroom within the royal palace of Andor. Rand al'Thor stepped through, but the act of travelling, of wrestling the tainted torrent of Saidin, left him swaying on his feet. The sickness was immediate and violent, a physical rejection of the Dark One's touch that coated the male half of the true source. He fought the urge to vomit, fighting simultaneously against the voice of Luz Therin Telemon, rattling inside his skull. The dead man screamed about the pit of doom, a madness echoing the living man's exhaustion. It is a profound psychological burden Rand carries. Two minds sharing one dwindling sanity, united only by nausea and the weight of prophecy. He was not alone. Min stepped through behind him, her boots kicking up the dust of ages. She was dressed for riding, refusing the silks of a lady for the practicality of breeches and a coat, a choice that marked her as distinctively as her visions. Rand looked at her and saw beauty. She looked at him and saw a wreck. But to the outside world, Rand was hidden. He had woven a mask of mirrors, an illusion of the one power. He was no longer the dragon reborn, tall and striking. He was now Newly, a stooped, lumpy servant with a wart on his nose. It is a necessary deception, yet it speaks to Rand's increasing isolation. He must erase his own face to move through the world he is trying to save. They moved into the corridors of the palace. Being Ta'veren, a focal point of the pattern, meant that probability bent around Rand. Servants who should have been bustling about were conveniently absent, leaving the hallways empty. However, the pattern does not always grant invisibility. They were intercepted by Mistress Harfa, the first maid of the palace, a woman whose authority was as tangible as steel. She recognized Min, but looked upon the disguised Rand with sharp suspicion. To her, he was just a clumsy, ill-favoured servant named Newly. The irony is palpable. The most powerful channeler in history, capable of breaking the world, forced to tug his forelock and mutter humble apologies to a housekeeper to avoid detection. While Rand navigated the treacherous waters of palace domestic hierarchy, Nynaeve Almira was enduring a trial of a different sort. In a grand room warmed by a fireplace, she was engaged in a humiliating lesson with the Atha An Mir, the Sea Folk. The agreement between the White Tower and the Sea Folk required the exchange of knowledge, but the dynamic had shifted drastically. Nynaeve, once the wisdom of Emond's Field, and now a powerful Aes Sedai, found herself outmatched by an apprentice named Talan. The lesson was brutal. Talan, young and terrifyingly strong in the power, wove flows of spirit and air with a dexterity that shamed Nynaeve. Twice, the apprentice managed to shield Nynaeve, cutting her off from the true source and binding her with air. The watching Windfinders, led by the imperious wave mistress Saida, offered no sympathy. They demanded Nynaeve try to break the shield, a feat generally considered impossible against someone of equal strength. Nynaeve threw herself against the barrier, hammering at the invisible wall of spirit until she was dripping with sweat and gasping for air, but the shield held. The Windfinders watched with cold, analytical eyes, judging her struggle not as a valiant effort, but as a test of her honesty. It is a stark reminder that the Aes Sedai are no longer the undisputed masters of the power. The world is full of women who are stronger, faster, and possess secrets the White Tower lost millennia ago. When Nynaeve was finally dismissed, her dignity in tatters, she stormed out, only to run into Olivia. The former Damane was a stark contrast to the Sea Folk. Where the Windfinders were bound by rigid hierarchy and tradition, Olivia was a living weapon forged by the Seanchan, carrying herself with the lethal grace of a predator. She spoke casually of killing, a chilling reminder of the violence Nynaeve was trying to navigate. But the surprises were not over. Talan, the Sea Folk apprentice who had just humiliated Nynaeve, came running after her. In a twist of irony, the girl was desperate. She begged Nynaeve to take her to the White Tower. The rigorous, punishing discipline of the Sea Folk society, where public affection is a crime and failure is met with corporal punishment, was crushing her. She saw the White Tower not as a place of servitude, but of freedom. It highlights a recurring theme: institutions that look like prisons to some are sanctuaries to others. Nynaeve, distracted and exhausted, gave a non-committal answer that Talan eagerly interpreted as a promise. Seeking solace, Nynaeve retreated to her chambers, where she found Lan Mandragoran. The bond between them was a grounding force, his presence a silent fortress against the chaos of her day. But their privacy was short-lived. Mistress Harfor arrived, dragging the disguised Rand, Newly, into the room. Once the door was closed and the first maid gone, the illusion dropped. Rand stood before them, the wart-nosed servant vanishing to reveal the weary face of the dragon reborn. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. Lan, though appearing relaxed, was coiled like a spring, his hand near his sword. He recognized the danger Rand represented, even to the woman he loved. Rand in turn looked at Lan with the acknowledgement of a fellow killer. Rand placed a heavy leather scrip on the table. From it he produced two statues, a bearded man and a serene woman, each holding a crystal sphere. These were the access keys to the Chodan Cowl, the most powerful sangreal ever created. The artifacts pulsed with a potential energy that could crack the world in half. Rand's request was simple yet terrified in its scope. He needed Nynaeve to hide them, and more importantly, he needed her help. He was done running, done hiding, and done suffering the taint that was rotting his mind and the minds of all male channelers. He revealed his plan. He intended to use these statues to cleanse Saidin itself. Nynaeve looked at him, really looked at him, and used her healing abilities to delve his body. What she found horrified her. The old wound in his side from Ishamael was there, but it was now compounded by a new, mirrored evil from the dagger of Shadar Logoth. He was a walking catalogue of pain and corruption, held together by sheer will. Yet, despite the danger, despite the sheer impossibility of the task, something even the legends of the Age of Legends had not achieved, she did not hesitate. When he spoke of challenging the Dark One's taint, she did not back down. She simply insisted that they would go together. It was a moment of profound bravery and loyalty, cementing Nynaeve's role not just as a healer, but as a warrior in the battle for the very soul of the power. Chapter 12. A Lily in Winter. The wheel of time turns, and threads of destiny weave together in the heart of Caemlyn, within the royal palace of Andor. Here we find Elaine Trakand, the daughter heir, attempting to maintain the regal composure expected of a queen in waiting, while navigating corridors that feel increasingly like a cage of her own making. She moves with a practiced grace, gliding rather than walking, though the heavy folds of her dark blue skirts threaten to trip her at every hurried step. There is a delicious irony in her situation. She is surrounded by the trappings of power, yet she feels the distinct itch of irritation, a sensation she likens to a grain of sand in a slipper. The source of this irritation, and indeed the centre of the world's current tumultuous turning, is Rand al'Thor. Elaine's retinue has changed, reflecting the shifting tides of the world. She is no longer guarded solely by the traditional red and white of the Queen's Guard men, but by women, Casil and Denny, clad in striking uniforms of crimson coats and plumed hats, a visual testament to the breaking of gender norms that seems to follow in the Dragon Reborn's wake. These female guards cause servants to stumble and stare, a ripple of social disruption that Elaine navigates with a sigh. But her mind is fixed on the man waiting behind a door, a man she fears will try to rescue her from threats she feels perfectly capable of handling herself. There is a profound psychological tension here. Elaine fights for agency in a world where men like Rand instinctively try to shelter women. Her behavior Nynaeve Almira dismissively categorizes as thinking with the hair on their chests. Elaine, accompanied by Min Farshaw and Avienda, approaches the confrontation. The dynamic between these three women is a fascinating study in unlikely sisterhood. They are as different as fire, earth and water, the Aiel warrior, the tomboy philosopher, and the stately royal, yet they are bound by a shared, inexplicable love for the same man. As they enter Nynaeve's chambers, the air is thick with anticipation. Rand is there, stripped of his disguises, revealing a beauty that catches Elaine off guard. But he is also physically wrecked, seized by a sudden violent nausea. This is the sickness of the taint, or perhaps the sheer physical toll of channeling such immense power, manifesting as a weakness that Nynaeve's healing weaves cannot touch. It is a stark reminder that while Rand is a figure of prophecy, his body is mortal and fraying at the edges. Rand attempts to push them away. His demeanour is rigid, a stone mask crafted to hide his terror. He speaks of the dangers that surround him, of the Asherman in their black coats who might be traitors, identifying only a precious few, Flynn, Narishma, Hopwill, as trustworthy. He tries to leave, to flee in order to protect these women from the crossfire of his destiny. But the women of the Westlands and the Waste are not so easily discarded. They refuse to be protected at the cost of separation. In a moment of supreme vulnerability, the dam breaks. Rand, the man who holds the fate of the world on his shoulders, confesses a truth that defies all Wetlander custom. He loves them all. Elaine, Avienda, Min. He loves each fully, without division, calling himself a lecher for it, his guilt acting as a barrier he tries to erect between himself and them. The reaction is not disgust, but acceptance, though Nynaeve nearly has an apoplexy at the sheer impropriety of it all. This scene deconstructs the traditional romantic narrative. Instead of a triangle of jealousy, we see a geometry of cooperation. Elaine, Min, and Avienda have already agreed to share him, a decision born of pragmatism and intense affection. They corner him, not with weapons, but with a proposal that is both a political maneuver and a romantic claim. They intend to bond him as their warder. All three of them. The transition to Elaine's apartments requires subterfuge, leading to Rand adopting a hideous disguise via the One Power, a brutish, warty visage that serves as a visual metaphor for how he views himself internally. Dangerous and unlovable. Yet once in private, the mask falls away. The tension in the room is palpable as they confront the reality of the bond. Rand reveals a secret that has plagued him. He is already bonded to Alana Mosvani, a violation of his will that still rankles. The women are furious on his behalf, their protective instincts flaring, proving that the warder bond goes both ways. They are ready to defend him even against their own kind. The ritual itself is a masterpiece of magical weaving. Elaine, guiding the circle with Avienda and Min, weaves spirit into a complex lattice. It is not the standard warder bond, but a modified version influenced by Aiel adoption ceremonies, creating a web of connection that links the three women to Rand. As the weave settles upon him, the metaphysical implications are immediate and crushing. The women do not just sense his presence, they are slammed with the physical reality of his existence. They feel the phantom agony of the heron brands on his palms, the old ache in his side, the accumulation of 1,000 cuts and bruises he has ignored. It is a moment of profound empathy. They realize he lives in a constant state of pain that would cripple a lesser man. Avienda, with tears streaming down her face, calls him the Kara Khan, acknowledging his superhuman endurance. Through the bond, they feel his emotions, rigid, hard like petrified sap, yet veined with a golden, pulsating love for them. After the bonding, the narrative shifts to the hallway, leaving Elaine and Rand to consummate their new connection. Min and Avienda find themselves facing a new threat, Birgitte Silverbow. The Captain General of the Queen's Guard is in a state of apoplectic shock. Because she is bonded to Elaine, she is experiencing everything Elaine is experiencing: the emotional intensity, the physical intimacy, the sheer overwhelming nature of the event. Birgitte, a legend reborn, is reduced to trembling fury, demanding strong alcohol to drown out the sensations flooding her mind. It is a moment of levity amidst the gravity, highlighting the unintended consequences of the One Power's connections. Birgitte sees through the political veneer to the absurdity of the situation, recognizing that her charge, the Queen in Waiting, has tied herself to the most dangerous man in creation. The chapter closes on a quiet, melancholic note. The next morning, Rand is gone. He has slipped away, leaving behind a golden lily, miraculously blooming in winter, preserved by the power. It is a symbol of hope amidst the cold, a promise that beauty can endure, even in the harshest times. Nynaeve and Lan have also vanished, taking with them powerful artifacts, signalling that the next phase of their desperate mission has begun. Chapter 13. Wonderful News. The narrative gaze shifts now to the Sun Palace in Cairhien, where the atmosphere is far colder, both in temperature and temperament. Here, Cadsuane Malydrin holds court. Cadsuane is a force of nature, an Aes Sedai of the Green Arger, who has become a living legend not through prophecy, but through sheer unyielding will. She sits in a sunroom that offers little warmth, surrounded by sisters she is testing and moulding. The theme here is control: who has it, who wants it, and how it is wielded. Cadsuane is currently managing the volatile sea folk. Hareen Din Tagara, a wave mistress of immense pride, demands the return of her Windfinder and restitution for perceived insults. The clash between Cadsuane and Hareen is a collision of two immovable objects. Cadsuane, however, operates on a different level of diplomacy. She does not shout, she simply flattens opposition with calm, terrifying threats of humiliation. She treats the dignitaries like recalcitrant children, ordering them to their rooms to meditate on civility, utilizing Serene as an enforcer. This scene illustrates Cadsuane's philosophy. Strength must be respected, but insolence must be crushed. She is clearing the board of distractions to focus on her primary objective, the Dragon Reborn. We see the political landscape through the eyes of the Aes Sedai. Cadsuane has gathered. There is a sense of nervous idleness. Sisters who were once haughty are now humbled, some serving penance under the watchful eyes of the Aiel wise ones like Sorilea. The relationship between Cadsuane and Sorilea is significant. It represents a fragile but potent alliance between the White Tower and the Waste, grounded in mutual respect for strength. They are two matriarchs plotting to guide a whirlwind. Verin Mathwin, the brown sister whose absent-minded demeanour hides a razor-sharp intellect, brings crucial intelligence. She reveals the secrets of the Cairhienin noblewoman Aiel and the seafolk Windfinder Shalon. They were not merely plotting treason, but were pillow friends, lovers hiding their relationship due to the strict social codes of their respective cultures. Therin's uncovering of this secret provides Cadsuane with leverage. In the game of houses, information is a weapon, and blackmail is a standard tactic. Cadsuane intends to use these women as eyes and ears, turning their vulnerability into her asset. But the chapter's title, Wonderful News, refers to a revelation that shatters 3,000 years of magical dogma. Coralie, a yellow sister, enters with news that Damer Flynn, one of the male channelers, has done the impossible. He has healed Ergain of Stilling. To understand the magnitude of this, one must remember that for an Aes Sedai, being stilled, cut off from the true source, is a fate considered worse than death. It is an incurable spiritual mutilation. The Tower has always taught that it cannot be fixed. Yet a man, using methods the Aes Sedai do not understand, has bridged that severance. Ergen, once a broken shell of a woman, has been restored. This news is terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. It fundamentally alters the balance of power. If men can heal what Aes Sedai cannot, the Tower's claim to supreme knowledge crumbles further. It also offers a glimmer of hope to those who have lost everything. The tension in the palace ratchets up when news arrives that Debrain, Rand's loyal steward, has outmaneuvered Cadsuane by sending the rebellious nobles Caroline Damodred and Darlin Cisnera away to safety. Cadsuane respects the move, even as she dislikes losing control. It shows that Rand's allies are learning to play the game at a high level. Suddenly, the physical consequences of the events in Caemlyn ripple all the way to Cairhien. Alana Mosvani collapses. She is the sister who forcibly bonded Rand previously. As Rand accepted the new triple bond from Elaine, Avienda and Min, the metaphysical feedback loop hit Alana like a hammer. She falls into a coma-like state, not from injury, but from the sheer shock of the overlaying weaves. The other Aes Sedai, unaware of the events in Caemlyn, are left in a state of dread. They fear Rand has been hurt or killed, or that he has severed the bond. This moment emphasizes the interconnectedness of the characters. Actions taken in one city send shockwaves across the continent. The perspective then shifts dramatically, taking us from the machinations of mortals to the Council of the Shadow. We find ourselves in a meeting of the Forsaken, the chosen of the Dark One. The setting is an illusion created by Graendal, a lush, impossible forest that masks the stark reality of their location near Sheol Ghul. The psychological atmosphere here is thick with paranoia. Dimandred, Osangar and Arangar are present, their alliances shifting like sand. They are immortal beings trapped in a cycle of treachery, fearing their master as much as their enemies. Dimandred is agitated, furious at their inability to pin down Rand. He perceives their failures as incompetence, railing against the blind fools who let Rand slip away. But the dynamic changes when Moradin enters. Moradin, the reincarnation of Ishamael, exudes an aura of dark authority that cowers even the other Forsaken. He is accompanied by Sindain, a petite, silver-haired woman of immense power, who is clearly the reincarnated Lanfear, though diminished and enslaved. Moradin displays his mastery over the true power, the essence of the Dark One himself, which manifests as Sar, black flecks floating across his eyes. He is careless with a rat, destroying it with a flick of his wrist using the true power, a casual display of nihilistic dominance. The difference between Saidin and the true power is highlighted here. One is a tool to be cleaned, the other is a drug that devours the user. The revelation Moradin brings is catastrophic for the Shadow. He reveals that Rand is not merely wandering, he has acquired the access keys to the Chodan Kal, the most powerful Sa'angreal ever created. Furthermore, Rand intends to use them to cleanse the taint from Saidin. The Forsaken are stunned. To them, the idea is madness, an impossibility that could shatter the world. Osangar, who was once Aginor, the creator of the Shadowspawn and a master geneticist, scoffs at the idea that a primitive, like Rand, could achieve such a feat of metaphysical engineering. However, Moradin's command is absolute. They are not to hunt Rand randomly, they are to wait. When Rand attempts to draw the massive amounts of power required for the cleansing, he will light up like a beacon to any who can channel. That is when they will strike. The trap is set. The chapter ends with the Shadow aligning its forces, preparing for a confrontation that will determine the fate of magic itself. The stakes have never been higher. The restoration of the male half of the Source, or the final victory of the Dark One's chaos. The pieces are moving, the trap is laid, and the winter snows are about to turn red. Chapter 14. What a Veil Hides. The rhythm of the ocean defines the return, a massive reclaiming of heritage that rolls on the grey-green swells of the sea. On the great ship Kidron, the High Lady Tuon sits in a meditative stillness, submitting to the razor of her dresser, Seleucia. This is a ritual of vulnerability and absolute trust. The razor glides over the scalp of a woman who commands armies, wielded by a woman who is theoretically a servant, yet fundamentally a shadow and protector. We see here the intricate, paradoxical layering of Seanchan society. Seleucia, with her golden hair and commanding beauty, could easily pass for the blood, yet she embraces her role as Sojin, a hereditary servant who is strictly property, yet holds power over high lords. There is a deep, psychological tether between them, forged in the cradle. Seleucia is the only one who can touch the Daughter of the Nine Moons without permission, a bond that transcends the rigid hierarchy of the Empire. But Tuon's mind is troubled by omens. A black-winged albatross follows the ship, a sign of victory surely, but the colour is wrong. More pressing is her own internal discord. She feels Seanchan, a state of lowered eyes or lost honour. This isn't about a military defeat, but a failure of self-mastery. She had allowed anger to dictate her commands regarding a damane the previous night, and for a ruler whose authority must be absolute and dispassionate, emotion is a weakness. To restore her balance, she chooses a veil. It is a calculated symbol, hiding nothing of her face physically, but signalling a spiritual separation, a self-imposed penance to realign herself with the patterns of the crystal throne. Tuon's inspection of her damane reveals the terrifying efficiency of Seanchan conditioning. She views these women not as captives but as beloved pets, prized for their skill and obedience. There is a genuine, chilling affection here. When she comforts Lydia, the damane she punished, the woman kisses her palm in gratitude. It illustrates how total the domination is. The cage is not just around the body, but has been built inside the mind. Tuon takes pride in their health and happiness, a benevolence that is perhaps more disturbing than cruelty, because it normalizes the dehumanization of channelers. On deck, the veil causes a ripple of shock among the blood, forcing them into deeper bows. But it is Anath, Tuon's truth speaker, who shatters the deference. Anath is a figure of imposing dread, her dark eyes piercing and critical. As a Soafea, she is inviolate, mandated to speak harsh truths to power. She mocks Tuon's veil as a farce and belittles her penance. There is a dangerous, predatory energy to Anath that seems to exceed even her station, a harshness that makes even the disciplined Tuon hesitate. They speak of the High Lady Suroth, whose ambition is growing too large, and of the dragon reborn. Tuon knows Rand al'Thor must kneel before the crystal throne for the world to survive Tarmon Gaidon. It is a moment of supreme dramatic irony. She sees herself as the saviour coming to reclaim stolen property, unaware of the chaotic force of destiny she is about to collide with. Chapter 15. In need of a bell founder. The atmosphere shifts from the salt-spray discipline of the Seanchan to the acrid, sulphurous interior of a wagon in Valen Luca's travelling show. Matt Cauthon, the reluctant hero, finds himself trying to charm Aludra, the Illuminator. The dynamic here is a dance of manipulation and desperation. Matt needs fireworks, essentially artillery, to level the playing field against the Seanchan, but Aludra guards her guild secrets with a ferocity born of survival. Matt is forced to use a cruel truth as a lever. He reveals that the Illuminators Guild in Tanchico has been destroyed, its members enslaved by the Seanchan. He plays the bearer of bad news to shatter her hope, a tactic that sits uncomfortably with his easygoing nature. It highlights the darker pragmatism developing in Matt. He will do what is necessary, even if it hurts someone he respects, to secure the weapons he needs. Aludra's reaction is visceral, grief transmuted instantly into rage, swinging a heavy pestle like a club. She is a woman of science and fire, not to be trifled with. However, she offers a trade, a riddle that appeals to Matt's gambler soul. If he can find her a bell founder, she will give him the secrets of the dragon's eggs. It's a puzzle that underscores Aludra's ingenuity. She is looking for metallurgy and casting techniques to weaponize her powder, effectively inventing the cannon in a world of swords and sorcery. Leaving the wagon, Matt's internal monologue reveals the chafing restrictions of his life. He is a prisoner of the Queen of Altara's affection, dressed in lace and embroidery that makes him feel like a doll, limping from injuries that refuse to vanish. The juxtaposition of the circus, a place of absurdity with acrobats and painted wagons, against the grim reality of the Seanchan occupation and his own entrapment, is stark. He watches Olva, the orphan boy he has inadvertently adopted, mimicking the lecherous behaviours of his uncles, the soldiers and scoundrels of the band. Matt completely lacks the self-awareness to realise Olva is modelling himself after him, blaming the influence on everyone else. The chapter closes with a signature sensation. The dice in Matt's head begin to tumble. It is the physical manifestation of being Tavaren, the pattern shifting and locking into a new, dangerous configuration. He is desperate to leave Ebu Dar, to escape the lace and the queen and the looming shadow of the Seanchan. But the dice signal that chance has already been cast. The carefree gambler is being forced to play a game with stakes far higher than gold, and the outcome is already thundering toward him. Chapter 14. What a Veil Hides. The rhythm of the ocean dictates the pace of the morning aboard the Victory of Kidron. We find ourselves in the stern cabin, where the gilded lamps sway in time with the long grey-green swells of the sea. Here sits the High Lady Tuon, a figure of immense power packaged in a diminutive frame, enduring the intimate, sharp slide of a razor across her scalp. This is a ritual of control, a daily reaffirmation of the severe discipline that defines the Seanchan blood. Through the windows, the view offers a staggering display of maritime might. Hundreds of great ships carve through the waves, a fleet stretching to the very edge of the horizon. This is the Karen, the return. To Tuon, the sight of a black-winged albatross following the ship is an omen of victory. For in the Seanchan worldview, the universe speaks in signs, and signs do not alter their meaning simply because geography changes. However, Tuon's internal landscape is less serene than her calm expression suggests. She is battling a sense of semosev, a loss of honour, a disturbance of the soul's equilibrium. Her error? Emotion. The previous night, she allowed anger to dictate a command, ordering a Damane punished for a foretelling she disliked. To rule is to be iron. To lash out in temper is the behaviour of a child, not the daughter of the 9 moons. This psychological turmoil drives her choice of attire. When her dresser and shadow, the golden-haired Seleucia, offers the traditional cap of the blood, Tuon refuses. Instead, she chooses a veil. It is a transparent thing, hiding nothing physical, but symbolising a separation from the world, a self-imposed barrier to restore her internal balance. It is a fascinating insight into the Seanchan mind. They are masters of others because they are slaves to their own rigid codes. Tuon moves through the ship, inspecting her possessions, human possessions. We see the Damane, leashed women who can channel, treated with a mix of affection and absolute dehumanization. Tuon checks on Lydia, the cause of her anger, and orders sweets for her, a corrective measure for her own lapse in judgment. She visits Mylan, once an Aes Sedai of the White Tower, now broken and remade into a happy pet. It is a chilling reminder of the Empire's terrifying efficiency at shattering identity. Upon the quarterdeck, the wind whips at Tuon's veil, but the true storm comes from Anath. Anath is Tuon's Sophia, a truth speaker. While technically property, a truth speaker's duty is to deliver harsh realities without fear of punishment. Anath is aggressive, mocking Tuon's veil as a farce and belittling her tantrum. There is a strange, predatory intensity to Anath, a darkness that seems to exceed her station, yet Tuon endures the verbal assault. She refuses a formal penance, deciding to hold her own course. As the coastline of Altara solidifies ahead, the conversation turns to politics. The High Lady Suroth has achieved much, but Tuon notes that great success breeds dangerous ambition. The goal remains absolute. The dragon reborn must kneel before the crystal throne. As the ship nears Edudar, Tuon is no longer just a woman seeking balance. She is an imperial force, arriving to reclaim what she believes is her birthright. Chapter 15. In Need of a Bellfounder. We shift perspectives from the cold discipline of the aristocracy to the chaotic, acrid interior of a wagon that smells of sulphur and charcoal. Matt Cauthon, recovering from his injuries and still limping, finds himself sitting on a 3-legged stool, watching Aludra the Illuminator grind powder. Matt is a man constantly at war with his own nature. He claims to want no part of heroes or battles, yet he seeks weapons of war. He is trying to charm Aludra into making fireworks for him, not for celebration, but for artillery. He envisions using her night flowers as explosives to launch against the Seanchan. To gain her cooperation, Matt delivers devastating news. He reveals that the Illuminators Guild chapter house in Tanchico has been destroyed, the members enslaved as Dakavale by the Seanchan because they refuse to yield. Aludra's reaction is visceral. She wields her heavy pestle like a club, her grief instantly transmuting into a desire for vengeance. The destruction of her guild strips away her old life, leaving her a rogue element with nothing to lose. However, Aludra is a craftswoman of secrets. She acknowledges Matt's cleverness regarding the military application of fireworks. He suggests using the launching tubes as crude mortars, but she demands a price for her full cooperation. She sets him a riddle. He must find her a bell founder. It seems an odd request, but metallurgy and cannon making are cousins in the art of war. She dismisses him with a mix of flirtation and command, noting his pretty bottom, which leaves Matt blushing and grumbling as he hobbles away. Matt's walk through Valen Luca's circus camp highlights his current predicament. He is trapped in the webs of Queen Tylin, dressed in lace and velvet that he finds ridiculous, a peacock kept in a gilded cage. He gathers his strange little family: Tom Merrilin, the gleeman who sees more than he says; Beslan, the prince of Ebudar who chafes under occupation; and Olver, the ugly orphan boy who is picking up all of Matt's bad habits, while Matt ironically lectures him on manners. Matt's internal alarm system, the dice tumbling in his head, begins to rattle. This is the manifestation of his Tavarin luck, a warning that a nexus of fate is approaching. He tries to ignore it, focusing on escape plans and gold, but the dice thunder on. He is a man walking toward a cliff edge, arguing that he is merely going for a stroll. Chapter 16. An Unexpected Encounter. The journey back to the city of Ebudar reveals the true horror of the Seanchan invasion. It is not merely an army, it is a migration. Matt and his companions are forced to stop as the road is choked with the return. Thousands of wagons, livestock, farmers and craftsmen are pouring into the land. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. An army can be defeated and sent home. But this is a population replacement. They bring their own cattle, their own crops, their own laws. They are not visiting. They are rooting themselves in the soil. Matt realizes the sheer scale of it. The harbour is clogged with ships, and the city is overflowing. The streets of Ebudar, usually a vibrant tapestry of duels and commerce, have become a crushed mosaic of humanity. The Seanchan are everywhere, gawking at the locals as if they are the oddities. Matt, Tom and Beslan navigate the press, discussing the hopelessness of resistance. Beslan dreams of rebellion, of making the city too hot to hold the invaders, but Matt sees the futility. The Seanchan are like a tide. You cannot stab a tide with a sword. The dice in Matt's head are deafening now, a constant roar of impending potentiality. Desperate to escape the noise and the crowds, and perhaps to find a game of chance to drown out the sound of fate, Matt wanders the city. But there is no room, no sanctuary. The city is full. Finally, seeking a shortcut back to the Tarasim Palace to avoid the curfew and the Queen's possessive affection, Matt ducks into a dark, muddy alley. It is here that the dice stop rolling, or rather, where they land. He trips in the muck, a clumsy accident that saves his life. A figure leaps where he had been standing a split second before. It is the Galam, a creature of the shadow, immune to the One Power, created to hunt channelers but seemingly happy to slaughter anyone in its way. It is a nightmare in human shape, fluid and boneless. Matt reacts with the instinct of a survivor. He has no weapon that can pierce the Galam's hide, except one. The fox head medallion he wears, a terangrial that dissolves flows of magic. He whips the medallion on its broken leather thong, striking the creature. The silver burns the Galam's flesh like a branding iron. The creature hisses, pained and shocked by this resistance. The encounter ends in a moment of grotesque body horror. The Galam, realizing this prey has teeth, decides to retreat. It does not run away. It squeezes itself through a mouse hole in the brickwork, compressing its bones and flesh into an impossible geometry. Matt is left panting in the mud, but he is not alone. An old man, stooped and weathered, steps from the shadows. He introduces himself as Noel Charin. He had distracted the creature, saving Matt a precious second. There is a sense of recognition about him, the history written in his broken nose and knobby hands. Matt, ever the reluctant Samaritan, offers the homeless old wanderer a place to stay. But as they stand in the reeking alley, Matt realizes something terrifying. The Galam is gone. He has survived the ambush. Yet inside his skull, the dice have not stopped. They are still tumbling. The encounter with the monster was not the event the fates were warning him about. Something else is coming. Something bigger. Chapter 17. Pink Ribbons. The wind biting through the Mulhara is more than just a winter chill. It is a physical manifestation of the bleakness settling over Ebudar. Matt Cauthon, caked in freezing mud and leaning heavily on his staff, hurries away from the alleyway, the echo of the golem's fluid, unnatural escape still rattling in his mind. The dice in his head are thundering, a relentless cacophony warning of a pivotal moment approaching, yet for once, the immediate physical threat of the creature that can squeeze through the smallest crack eclipses the metaphysical warning. Matt and his new strange companion, Noel Charin, navigate a city that has been fundamentally altered. The slat-ribbed dogs and the silence of the square speak of a population cowed by occupation. The statue of Queen Narienne stands as a silent witness to the changing tides of power, pointing either to bounty or danger, an ambiguity that perfectly mirrors Matt's current existence. The Tarasin Palace, once a symbol of Ulteran exuberance, has been transformed into a fortress of the Seanchan Empire. The visual contrast is stark. The colourful, swashbuckling style of the Ibudari guards stands in rigid opposition to the insectile, lacquered armour of the Seanchan troops. Even their postures differ, one flexible and human, the other stiff and alien. Inside the stableyard, the reality of the occupation hits with visceral force. Matt witnesses the domain being exercised. Among them is Teslin Baradon. Seeing a red. Aes Sedai, a woman of immense power and arrogance reduced to a docile pet, walking on a leash and bowing obediently, strikes a chord of revulsion in Matt. Despite his distrust of the White Tower, this dehumanization is a step too far. It forces a complex psychological moment, pity for an enemy. It is a stark reminder that under the Crystal Throne, identity is obliterated in service to the Empress. Matt's attempt to push his followers away highlights his reluctant leadership. He finds the Red Arms, including the cynical Vannin and the steadfast Harnan, and offers them gold to leave him. He tries to paint himself as a danger to them, which he is, but their refusal is telling. They see the Tavaran nature in him, the leader he refuses to admit he is. Noel, too, integrates himself effortlessly, spinning tales with the skill of a gleeman, hinting at a life of vast experience that belies his ragged appearance. But the true turning point of the night awaits in Tylin's apartments. Matt enters, expecting a domestic skirmish with the Queen, but the dice in his head suddenly stop, not with a whimper, but with a deafening crash of silence. This signifies a momentous intersection of fate lines. The room is occupied by the most powerful women in the city, and perhaps the world. We see Queen Tylin, reduced to a nervous subordinate, High Lady Suroth, the terrifying leader of the Forerunners, looking uncharacteristically anxious, and a small, doll-like figure veiled in sheer fabric. This is Tuon. The dynamics in the room are a masterclass in Seanchan hierarchy, which is often counterintuitive to outsiders. The tall, imperious woman, Aneth, speaks with the tone of command, yet she lacks the shaved head of the blood. Conversely, the childlike Tuon, dripping in rubies, possesses a stillness that screams of absolute authority. When Matt speaks, breaking protocol, the reaction is shock. Tuon approaches him not as a person, but as a specimen. Her examination of him is clinical, invasive, and dehumanizing. She checks his teeth and limbs as one would a horse. Then comes the shock that resonates with the stopped dice. Tuon asks Tylin for Matt's price. She offers to buy him. It is a chilling moment that encapsulates the Seanchan worldview. Everything and everyone is property. When Tylin stammers that Matt is a free man, Tuon dismisses the concept entirely. She then pivots, displaying the volatile benevolence of absolute power, declaring she will elevate Tylin to the high blood. The scene ends with Matt bewildered. The dice have stopped. The monumental event has occurred, meeting the daughter of the Nine Moons, though he does not yet realize who she is. And he is left merely with the threat of Tylin's pink ribbons. The cosmic gears have shifted, locking him into a destiny he is desperately trying to outrun. Chapter 18. An Offer. The aftermath of the encounter with the Golem and the meeting with the High Blood settles into a grey, oppressive rhythm. The atmosphere of Ebudar is heavy with the damp chill of winter and the weight of the Seanchan war machine. Matt, in a symbolic act of rebellion against his gilded captivity, burns the pink ribbons and clothes Tylin has forced upon him. The stench of burning wool and silk is the smell of a man reclaiming his dignity, swapping the colours of a pet for the sturdy coat of a rogue. As Matt moves through the city, we get a panoramic view of the Empire's might. Robert Jordan fills the streets with the exotic fauna of the Seanchan homeland, the three-eyed Torm, the bird-like Calm, and the massive Shreddit. These creatures serve to alienate the setting further. Ebu Dar is becoming less Westland and more Seanchan by the day. The rumours swirling through the inns are equally disorienting. Rand al'Thor is dead, or captured, or sworn to the Amelin. The confusion of the fog of war is palpable. Matt, ever the pragmatist, focuses on survival, sensing that the world is unravelling, but knowing he can do nothing about the dragon reborn from within the grip of the Tarasin Palace. Matt seeks refuge and storage at the Wandering Woman, re-establishing his connection with Setelianan. There is a comfortable camaraderie here, a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension of the palace. He begins to squirrel away his gold and gear, preparing for the inevitable flight. His interactions with the Red Arms and his attempts to court Eludra for fireworks highlight his frantic need for an exit strategy. He is a man planning a heist where the prize is his own freedom. However, the shadow of the Seanchan blood looms large. Matt's avoidance of Tylin's bedchamber, and her knife stuck in the bedpost, becomes a game of cat and mouse. But it is his silent interactions with Tuon that carry the most weight. She is a ghostly presence, observing him from windows, appearing in corridors. The critical interaction occurs when Matt returns to his rooms to find Tuon holding his Ashandare. This is a scene rich with foreshadowing. She traces the old tongue script on the spear. Thus is our treaty written. Thus is agreement made. And studies the ravens and foxes. The symbolism here is thick. The raven is the symbol of the Empire, yet these are the ravens of the Tower of Genje, of Norse mythology's Odin, representing thought and memory. Tuon, who treats people as commodities, offers to buy the spear for 10 times its price. Matt's refusal is significant. The price wasn't gold, he tells her, touching the scar around his neck where he was hanged. It is a rare moment of vulnerability and solemnity for Matt. He is defining his value system against hers. Some things are paid for in blood and soul, and cannot be bought with coin. Tuon's reaction is to look right through him, erasing his existence, because he refuses to fit into her transaction-based worldview. As the chapter closes, Matt feels a false sense of security. The golem has not struck again, his gold is hidden, and he believes he is outsmarting his captors. He stands over the hollow in the floor of the inn, satisfied with his preparations. But the reader knows better. The dice have stopped, the trap is set, and the net of the crystal throne is tightening. Matt Cauthon believes he is a free man planning an escape, but he is already caught in a web spun by the pattern itself, with the tiny, veiled figure of Tuon at its centre. Chapter 19. 3 Women. The wind bites from the north in Ebu Dar, bringing with it the gloom of rain and the heavy atmosphere of occupation. We find Matt Cauthon inside the Wandering Woman Inn, a place now teeming with Seanchan soldiers and the haze of pipe smoke. The cultural collision here is palpable. Locals stare in confusion at foreign customs, while the conquerors make themselves at home. Matt, ever the reluctant hero, is trying to navigate the breakfast crowd without drawing undue attention, though his luck with cards has drawn eyes to his gold, and his past reputation with the innkeeper's daughter Mara draws only her ire. There is a psychological weight to Matt's movements here. He feels the walls closing in, the need to flee the city growing desperate. He retreats to the kitchen, seeking the favour of Enid, the formidable cook. But the kitchen holds more than just the aroma of roasting fish. It holds a dangerous secret. Mistress Anan, the innkeeper, is hiding a fugitive. Jolene Mazza, an Aes Sedai of the Green Arger, is there, disguised in worn wool, her nerves shattered by days of evading the Seanchan patrols. It is a testament to Mistress Anan's strength of character that she risks everything to shelter a woman who can channel, defying the very empire that now rules her city. The tension spikes immediately. The inn is invaded by the arrival of a high-ranking Seanchan party. It is Aegean in Tamarath, recently raised to the blood as a captain of the Green, accompanied by her new Sojin, the distinctively bearded Bael Domon. Matt is forced into a split-second improvisation, utilising his roguish persona as camouflage. He grabs the terrified Aes Sedai, pulls her onto his lap, and feigns a lecherous embrace to hide her face. It is a moment of high irony, Mat playing the fool to save a woman of the White Tower. And it works. Egeanin, disgusted by the public display, turns away. Once the danger passes, Mat spirits Jolene down to the cellar. Here the narrative shifts from immediate physical danger to the complexities of obligation. Jolene speaks of a debt owed to Mat, referencing a note left for him. But Mat realizes a sickening truth. The note warning Elaine and Nynaeve did not come from Jolene. This implies there is another player in the game, another debt he unknowingly holds. Driven by this realization, Mat returns to the Tarasin Palace, entering the belly of the beast. He ascends to the attic, now converted into makeshift kennels for Damane. The description here is harrowing, highlighting the brutal efficiency of the Seanchan dehumanization process. He sees captured seafolk women, broken and weeping, collared like animals. He finds Teslin Baradon, a Red Sister, sitting on her narrow bed. The psychological toll of the Adam is laid bare in their conversation. Teslin admits she sent the note not out of kindness, but out of a spiteful desire to inconvenience Elada. More disturbing is her admission that she finds herself looking forward to the sweets the Suldam give her as rewards. It is a terrifying glimpse into the conditioning of the domain, the erosion of the self through a cycle of punishment and infantile reward. Teslin, however, retains enough of her Red Arger steel to strike a bargain. She will do anything Mat asks if he helps her escape, but she refuses to leave without Edicina, another captured sister. Mat's burden triples in an instant. He came to save himself, and now he is responsible for 3 women who can channel in a city locked down by an empire that views them as dangerous animals. As he leaves the kennels, he nearly collides with the High Lady Tuon. Mat spins a quick lie about seeking a windfinder to offer pastries, and Tuon, peering through her veil, offers a chilling warning. She cautions him against perversion, noting that some men take Damane to their beds. To her, Damane are pets, and Mat's supposed kindness is viewed through a lens of disgusted curiosity. Mat flees, the weight of the impossible heist he must now plan pressing down on him. He realizes he cannot do this alone. He needs the cunning of Tom Merrilin and the street smarts of Julin Sandar. Chapter 20. Questions of Treason. The perspective shifts to the other side of the leash, immersing us in the mind of Bethamin Ziami, a Suldam striving for absolute perfection. We follow her through the Damane kennels of the Tarasin Palace. Bethamin is a study in repressed terror. She drives herself and her subordinates, particularly Renna, with relentless discipline. There is a deep, unspoken history here. Renna was one of the Suldam exposed as a Marath Daman, a woman who can channel, during the debacle at Falme. That secret, that a Suldam is merely a woman who can channel but has not yet sparked, is the crack in the foundation of the entire Seanchan Empire. Bethamin knows this secret, and she knows that Suroth knows it. Bethamin's internal monologue reveals the precarious nature of her existence. She performs her inspections with rigid efficiency, noting the state of the prisoners. She visits Zushi, a windfinder broken by tears, and Tessie, an Ileana Aes Sedai who feigns compliance while hiding a sharp, calculating anger. Bethamin sees through Tessie's facade, recognizing the danger in her eyes. Yet she recommends harsher training, not out of sadism, but out of a desperate need to prove her own loyalty and competence. She is a woman walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, terrified that at any moment her own ability to see the weaves of the power will be discovered, and the collar will snap around her own neck. Leaving the palace, Bethamin seeks solace in retail therapy, a mundane attempt to normalize a life lived in fear. But the streets of Ebu Dar offer no comfort, only reminders of the occupying force she serves and fears. She returns to her cramped quarters at the Golden Swan's Inn, hoping for rest. Instead, she finds her worst nightmare waiting. A man is in her room. He has opened her lockbox and is reading her diary. He shows her the ivory plaque of the Seekers for Truth, the secret police of the Crystal Throne. For a Seanchan, this is the end. The Seekers answer only to the Empress. They can break the High Blood as easily as a peasant. Bethamin is paralyzed, certain that her secret ability to channel has been exposed. However, the interrogation takes a sharp, political turn. The Seeker is not there for her, but for a larger quarry. He reveals a web of treason that implicates the highest levels of command. He suspects Aeginin of murdering Suldam to cover up the secret of Falme and of conspiring with Aes Sedai. Even more dangerous, he hints that the High Lady Suroth herself might be a traitor, implicated in the murder of the High Lord Turak and the harbouring of Marath Domain. The Seeker recruits Bethamin as a listener. She is to renew her acquaintance with Aeginin, now raised to the blood, and spy on her. The psychological pressure applied is immense. The Seeker deconstructs Bethamin's reality, laying out the corruption rotting the Empire from within. He threatens her not just with death, but with the Tower of Ravens, should she fail. Bethamin is left with no choice. She is caught between the hammer of the Seekers and the anvil of the truth she hides. To survive, she must betray the woman who once saved her, becoming a pawn in a deadly internal war for the soul of the Seanchan Empire. The chapter ends with her submission, a terrifying confirmation that in this game of shadows, no one is safe, and treason is a matter of perspective. Chapter 21. A matter of property. We begin in the suffocating atmosphere of Ebu Dar, specifically within the personal chambers of Aeginin, a Seanchan captain of the Green. The narrative immediately draws us into her psychological state, a blend of rigid discipline and rising panic. She lies on her bed, stiff and unmoving to preserve the pleats of her dress, a physical manifestation of the stifling Seanchan social structure that binds her. Aeginin is a woman who has risen high, skipping ranks to stand upon the perilous slopes of the imperial hierarchy. Yet she feels less like a commander and more like prey. Bael Domon, the Ileana smuggler who is now her Sojin, a hereditary upper servant who is technically property, pokes at the fire. Their dynamic is a fascinating study in cultural friction. Domon, with his rough affection and stubbornness, refuses to act like property, while Aeginin struggles to reconcile her feelings for him with the ironclad laws of her upbringing. She loves him, a realization that terrifies her more than any storm at sea. She wants to marry him, but in the Seanchan worldview, one does not marry property. The only solution is manumission, freeing him. But to Aeginin, casting a Sojin out of the protection of her house feels like a cruel abandonment, akin to leaving a child in the wilderness. The tension in the room spikes with a knock at the door. It is not an assassin, but something equally dangerous. Bethamin, a former Suldam. The woman is terrified, a stark contrast to the arrogance usually displayed by those who hold the leashes of Damane. Bethamin reveals that a seeker for truth, the terrifying secret police of the Empire, is blackmailing her. He knows almost everything about their illicit activities in Tanchico, except for the most damning secret of all. Here, Robert Jordan exposes the hairline fracture that threatens to shatter the entire Seanchan Empire. Bethamin admits that she, and other Suldam, can learn to channel. The Empire is built on the axiom that channelers are animals to be leashed by normal women. If it becomes known that the leash holders are fundamentally the same as the women they enslave, the Crystal Throne would collapse. Aeginin, once a pillar of imperial certainty, finds her world dissolving into shades of grey. She realizes she can no longer rely on the absolute truths she was raised with. Facing the threat of the Seeker, who is tightening a noose of treason around her neck, she makes a desperate choice. She will not yield. She decides to protect Bethamin and, by extension, herself. Domon, ever the pragmatist, offers a solution that bridges the gap between their isolated struggle and the wider world. He mentions seeing a familiar face in the kitchens, Mat Cauthon. He recalls Mat's uncanny ability to survive the impossible from Trollocs to Myrddraal. Aeginin, grasping for any lifeline in these shoal waters, agrees. The chapter closes on a note of grim determination. Aeginin sits with a cup of brandy she does not drink, her moral compass shattered, resolved to do whatever it takes to survive, a sentiment that echoes the darkening path of the light's defenders everywhere. Chapter 22. Out of Thin Air. The scene shifts to the cold, slate-grey streets of Farm Adding. This city is unique in the lore, a geopolitical anomaly, where a terrestrial steading-like effect prevents the use of the One Power. It is a city of stone and commerce, ruled by women and suspicious of outsiders. Rand al'Thor moves through the crowd, a predator camouflaged in plain brown woolens. The absence of the power leaves him stripped of his greatest weapon, yet he is far from helpless. Inside his mind, the voice of Luce Therin Telemon raves, the chaotic counterpoint to Rand's icy focus. The madman screams that they are in a trap, that they must flee, but Rand suppresses the hysteria. He is hunting. His quarry is Roshaid, a renegade Asherman. The man struts through the Amhara market in a red coat, arrogance radiating from him like heat. Roshaid believes he is the hunter, unaware that the dragon reborn is stalking him from the shadows. The psychological burden on Rand is immense. He is not just fighting the shadow, but the disintegration of his own identity. Yet the madness of Luce Therin is becoming a twisted asset. The ancient voice bleeds skills and instincts into Rand, sharpening him. The pursuit leads into the labyrinthine alleyways of Far Madding, away from the prying eyes of the street guards. In these narrow stone-walled veins of the city, the confrontation explodes. It is brutal, visceral, and entirely devoid of magic. Roshaid, realizing too late that he has been cornered, tries to draw his sword. Rand, moving with Blademaster speed, traps the weapon and strikes. There is no balefire here, only the sickening crack of cartilage as Rand crushes Roshaid's throat. But the trap has layers. As Roshaid dies, another renegade, Kisman, emerges from the shadows, intent on stabbing Rand in the back. It is a moment that highlights the treacherous nature of the Shadow's servants. Kisman is almost relieved Roshaid is dead, thinning the competition for the rewards promised by the Forsaken. However, the arrival of the street guards forces a stalemate. Rand and Kisman flee in opposite directions to escape the law. Kisman's escape, however, leads him into a horror far worse than capture. As he blends into the crowd, a whisper brushes against his ear. "He belongs to me." A slash appears on his arm, not from a blade, but from a presence unseen. The wound turns black and bloated instantly, rotting the flesh. Kisman, terrified and bewildered, realizes he has run afoul of a power distinct from the Dark One, the corrupting, chaotic evil of Shadar Logoth, carried by Paddan Fain. He dies in the street, hallucinating that the Chosen have come to punish him. Rand returns to the Crown of Moredo Inn, the adrenaline fading into grim resolve. He gathers his strange, formidable entourage, Min, his anchor to humanity, Nynaeve, struggling with her blockage but fierce in her loyalty, and Olivia, the captured Seanchan Damane, who is now a weapon aimed at the Shadow. Rand tells them they must leave immediately. The failed ambush means the other renegade Asherman will be closing in. A subtle but chilling moment occurs as they pack. Rand realizes he can perfectly visualize the faces of his enemies, Dashiva, Torval, Gedwin, and that he possesses the skill to draw them, a talent he never had before. It is another bleed-through from Luce Therin, a reminder that the boundary between the two souls is eroding. The narrative then takes a jarring leap into Teleran Riod, the world of dreams. We follow Isam, the darker half of the entity known as Slayer. In the dream reflection of Far Madding, he enters a room and brutally murders a sleeping couple. Because this is the wolf dream, death here means death in the waking world. Isam believes he has just assassinated Rand and Min on the orders of a blurred, unidentifiable Forsaken. He is wrong. He has killed strangers, a tragic case of mistaken identity. Isam, shifting into his Luke persona, feels no remorse, only the cold satisfaction of the hunt. He extinguishes a candle in the dream, plunging the room into darkness, unaware that his true prey has already slipped the net. The chapter ends on this note of senseless violence, emphasizing the terrifying reach of the Shadow and the fragility of life in a world where dreams can kill. Chapter 23. To Lose the Sun. Our journey begins in a disorienting haze of cold air and unfamiliar terrain. Shalon, a wind-finder of the sea folk, finds herself far from the rhythmic comfort of the ocean, clumsily navigating a horse through a gateway woven by Cadswain Maladrin. The transition is jarring, from the stable-yard of the Sun Palace to a bleak, biting wilderness in the hills of Kintara. Robert Jordan paints a landscape of desolation here, stunted pines fit only for turpentine, bare grey branches resembling old bones, and a bitter chill that bites through wool. For Shalon, this physical discomfort mirrors her internal anxiety. She views the horse beneath her not as a noble steed, but as a treacherous beast with a mind of its own, a stark contrast to the obedient, engineered grace of a ship. This highlights the fundamental displacement of the sea folk characters. They are fish out of water, stripped of their elemental advantages. Dominating this scene is Cadsuane. Clad in unrelieved green, she rides with an imperious ease that defies the freezing wind. While others huddle for warmth, Cadsuane appears untouched by the elements, a subtle indication of her strength of will, or perhaps a specific weave of the one power. The hierarchy here is palpable. Even among the Aes Sedai, there are invisible currents of power. Shalon observes the deferential behaviour of the other sisters toward Cadsuane, noting that beneath the surface of their ageless faces, a complex pecking order exists. The Aes Sedai are not a monolith. They are a collection of fractured alliances, with Cadsuane as the undeniable centre of gravity. Hareen, the wave mistress, is seething. Her authority, absolute on the deck of a ship, is eroding in this landlocked expedition. She complains of protocol violations and the indignity of being separated from her entourage, her frustration manifesting in a physical struggle to stay atop her swaying mount. This is a study in power dynamics. Hareen attempts to assert dominance through complaints and titles, while Cadsuane asserts dominance simply by existing and giving orders. As the party moves south, the tension shifts from social friction to an existential threat. They descend toward a lake, in the centre of which lies an island city fortified behind massive walls, Far Madding. But as they approach, something catastrophic happens to Shalon. The true source, the driving force of her life, the warm, vibrant connection to the universe, simply vanishes. Jordan describes this not merely as a loss of ability, but as a spiritual amputation. For a channeler, the one power is life itself, more vital than breath. To enter the perimeter of Far Madding is to step into a void. This is the city's ancient defence, a ter'angreal known as the Guardian, which replicates the effects of a steading. Inside this boundary, no one can channel, and worse, they cannot even feel the source. For Shalon, it is as if the sun has been extinguished, leaving the world grey, flat, and terrifyingly empty. It is a profound psychological violation that strips the mighty of their greatest weapon, reducing Aes Sedai and Windfinders alike to ordinary women. Chapter 24. Among the Councils. The narrative continues as the party crosses the long bridge into Far Madding. The transition into the city is marked by a ritual of disarmament. In this matriarchal society, the rules of engagement are different. Violence is suppressed with almost obsessive rigidity. The famous peace bonding of weapons occurs here. Swords are wire-wrapped and sealed with lead, rendering them useless. It is a fascinating inversion of the world outside. Here, a sword is a liability, and the one power is a non-entity. The Aes Sedai and warders are neutered, forced to rely on wit and diplomacy rather than strength. Shalon, still reeling from the loss of the sun, struggles to maintain her composure. She feels hollowed out, observing the city through a haze of withdrawal. The architecture of Far Madding reflects its values. Statues of women dominate the squares, celebrating commerce and industry. It is a pragmatic place, one that values trade over the mystic arts, and the reception Cadsuane receives reflects this. They arrive at the Hall of the Councils, a palace crowned by a massive blue dome. The welcome is anything but warm. The first council, Alais Barsala, greets them with a mixture of formal courtesy and thinly veiled hostility. Barsala is a woman used to command, and she clearly views the arrival of Aes Sedai as a disruption to her orderly city. There is a clash of titans here. Barsala, the political ruler protected by the Guardian, versus Cadsuane, the legendary Aes Sedai who refuses to be humbled even when stripped of her magic. We see Cadsuane's brilliance in how she handles the councils. She doesn't need the power to intimidate. She uses her reputation and her sharp tongue. She dismisses the first council's attempts to sideline her, insisting on staying in the palace. It is a lesson in soft power. Cadsuane dominates the room through sheer force of personality. However, the most intriguing manoeuvre comes from Verin Mathwin. While Cadsuane bullies the leadership, Verin plays the part of the eccentric, distracted scholar. She wanders to the balcony overlooking the Guardian, a device of crystal discs and tracking mechanisms. Verin notices that the device doesn't just block the power, it triangulates the location of anyone attempting to channel. Verin then casually drops a bombshell into the conversation. She mentions Gwaire Amalasan, a false dragon who conquered Far Madding despite being unable to channel. and then muses about the current Dragon Reborn and the terrifying Seanchan Empire. It is a masterstroke of psychological warfare. By feigning innocence, Perrin plants deep seeds of fear in the Council's minds, reminding them that their protective bubble is not as impenetrable as they believe. She manipulates their anxiety to create an opening, allowing her and Kumira to investigate the Guardian further. The chapter closes on a surprisingly intimate note between the Seafolk sisters. Hareen, usually so abrasive and demanding, sees Shalon's terror. The loss of the source has stripped away their ranks and pretensions, leaving them simply as two frightened women in a strange land. Hareen offers comfort, promising not to leave Shalon alone in the dark. It is a rare moment of vulnerability that humanizes Hareen, showing that beneath the arrogance of the Wave Mistress lies a protective older sister. In these chapters, we see the characters stripped of their physical and metaphysical armor. Farmadding serves as a crucible, forcing them to rely on their essential selves, their courage, their wits, and their loyalty to one another when the light of the power has gone out. Chapter 25. Bonds. The air in the room at the Council's head inn is heavy, not just with the damp chill of Farmadding, but with the weight of history pressing down on the Dragon Reborn. Rand al'Thor sits with his back against the wall, legs folded, the silver-mounted flute of Tom Merrilin in his hands. He plays a tune called Lament for the Long Night, a melody he has never learned, yet his fingers find the notes with haunting precision. It is the bleed-through of a past life. Luz Therin Telamon knows this song, and within the caverns of Rand's mind the dead man weeps. There is a profound psychological dissonance here. Rand is in a city where he cannot touch the One Power, a place that should leave him feeling naked and vulnerable. Yet he finds a paradoxical comfort in the silence, in the absence of the struggle for the source. He plays to drown out the sorrow of a madman sharing his skull, while Min paces the flowered carpet, her anxiety a palpable storm in the room. Min is not agitated by the music, but by the threats looming over the man she loves. She is consumed by the prophecy involving Olivia, the Seanchan woman who is said to help Rand die. To Min, whose viewings are absolute, this is a terrifying sentence. To Rand, possessed of a fatalism that has hardened him like iron, death seems almost like a release, a final rest he feels he deserves. This fundamental disconnect highlights the tragedy of his existence. He fights for a world he expects to leave, while Min fights for his place within it. We also see the complex metaphysics of the Warder bond. Rand contrasts the bond he shares with Min, Elaine, and Avienda, which feels organic, a part of his own breath, against the bond forced upon him by Alana Mosvani. Alana's connection is described as a sandspur, an intrusion, a stranger peering over his shoulder. It is a violation that has never healed, a constant reminder of his lack of agency, even as the most powerful man in the world. The tension breaks with the arrival of Cadsuane Malydrin, and she does not come quietly. She brings Alana, whose emotions, a chaotic mix of fury, nervousness, and bizarre joy, have been battering Rand's mind. Cadsuane enters without her great serpent ring, blending in as a wealthy merchant, yet her presence commands the room more than any queen. The dynamic here is a power struggle of the highest order. Rand attempts to assert authority, but Cadsuane treats him like a petulant child, even delivering a physical slap when his language becomes foul. It is a shocking breach of protocol against the Dragon Reborn, yet it underscores Cadsuane's role. She is the anvil against which Rand must be shaped, refusing to bow to his title or his madness. The confrontation with Alana reveals the depth of the Green Aes Sedai's obsession and her dilemma. She is furious that Rand has been bonded by others, threatening to birch the women responsible, unaware she is speaking to one of them in Min. Rand, cold and detached, demands she release him. Alana refuses, citing her duty, but she reveals a startling desperation. She had even offered to pass his bond to Cadsuane, who refused. This revelation terrifies Rand. The idea of being permanently tethered to the iron-willed Cadsuane is a fate worse than death. But the conversation shifts to earth-shattering lore. Alana reveals that Damer Flynn, one of the older Ashermen, has discovered a way to heal Stilling. He has restored the ability to channel to the Aes Sedai stilled at Dumai's wells. This overturns 3,000 years of White Tower dogma. It is a miracle that changes the balance of power. Yet Rand receives it with the wary calculation of a general. He maneuvers Alanna, ordering her to Cairhien to manage the rebellion and negotiate with the High Lords, effectively exiling her from his presence while utilizing her utility. He is learning to use people as tools, a trait of the Luz Therin persona surfacing more and more. As Alanna leaves, Rand is left alone with the puzzle of Cadsuane. He realizes Min is right. He needs the legendary Aes Sedai, but he must figure out how to engage her without becoming her puppet. He sits in the silence of Far Madding, a man who can break the world, trying to outthink a woman who has intimidated Amelin's seats for centuries. Chapter 26. Expectation. The narrative shifts to the ephemeral, shifting landscape of Teleran Riod, the world of dreams. Elaine Trakand walks beside Egwene Alvear across the village green of Eamon's Field, but it is not the village of their childhood. The dream reflects reality, and the reality of the two rivers is transformation. Thatch has given way to tile, timber to stone. It is a bustling, industrialized town now, surrounded by walls and guarded by the banner of the Red Eagle. This visual transformation serves as a potent symbol for the loss of innocence. The sleepy backwater that birthed the dragon is gone, replaced by the rising ghost of Manetheren. Egwene, appearing in the dream as the Amelin seat, is burdened by the weight of her stole. The friendship between the two women is still there, but it is strained by the demands of their offices. Egwene is hardening, making decisions that will cost lives, echoing the ruthlessness required of Suan Sanche. They discuss the ominous movements of the world, Rand's unpredictability, and the rumours of Aes Sedai swearing fealty to him, a concept that shakes the foundations of Egwene's worldview. The dream ends, and Elaine wakes in the royal palace of Caemlyn. The transition from the ethereal to the physical is abrupt. We are treated to the domestic intimacy between Elaine and Avienda, who share a bed and a bond of sisterhood that transcends culture. There is a lightness here, a brief respite, as they bicker over clothes and food. Elaine is pregnant, a secret she guards fiercely, forced to endure a diet of healthy porridge while craving spiced wine. The political reality of Andor quickly encroaches. Elaine holds court, not yet a queen but acting as one. She navigates the treacherous waters of the succession, dealing with spies and money shortages. Enter Captain Doylin Mellor, a man who saved her life, but oozes a dangerous, ambitious charm. Elaine plays a perilous game, allow rumours to circulate that Mellor might be the father of her child, to protect the true lineage of the Dragon Reborn. It is a calculated risk, using a man she instinctively dislikes to shield a secret that could tear the kingdom apart. The atmosphere in the palace is one of frantic maintenance, holding the roof up while the walls shake. Reports come of rats in the sewers and spies in the household, painting a picture of a city under siege from within and without. The chapter culminates with the return of Merilil and the urgent news from the north. The massive Borderlander army, over 200,000 strong, is stalled in the snow at New Brame. They are not moving, yet they are not starving. The revelation that 10 Aes Sedai are hiding within their ranks changes the calculus entirely, but the hook that catches Elaine is the message they have sent. The Borderlander rulers know she was at Falme. This is a critical breach of information. Very few know the truth of what happened on Toman Head, binding Elaine inextricably to Rand in the eyes of these foreign kings and queens. They demand a meeting. Elaine, realizing that her secret and her unborn children are vulnerable to those who know too much, makes a snap decision. She cannot wait for the snows to melt or for diplomacy to take its slow course. She must confront this massive force now. It is a moment of queenly resolve. She leaves the safety of Caemlyn to face an army that could crush her nation, driven by the need to protect the legacy of the dragon and secure her own throne. The chapter closes on the precipice of action, the quiet planning of the morning giving way to the urgency of the travelling weave. Chapter 27. To surprise queens and kings. The winds of the world blow cold in the winter, and nowhere is the chill felt more sharply than in the halls of power, where the fate of nations rests on a razor's edge. In the royal palace of Caemlyn, Elaine Trakand is not merely a claimant to the Lion Throne, but an Aes Sedai of the Green Arger, and she understands that sometimes the only way to secure peace is to walk unarmed into the heart of a storm. There is a flurry of activity in the daughter heir's apartments, a whirlwind of anxiety that contrasts with Elaine's steely resolve. She intends to confront the borderland armies that have mysteriously camped within her borders, 4 massive hosts from Shinar, Arafel, Kandor, and Saldea. Her advisors and protectors are frantic. Avienda, channeling the harsh wisdom of the Aiel Wise Ones, warns that this reckless haste is unwise. Vegeta, whose very soul is bound to Elaine's through the Warder Bond, mirrors this frustration. The bond is a curious piece of magic. It allows them to share stamina and sense direction, but it also creates a feedback loop of emotion. Right now, Vegeta's concern is a palpable weight in Elaine's mind, a growling echo of fear for the woman she protects and the unborn children Elaine carries. Elaine, however, is playing the great game. She knows that queens hate surprises and kings despise them, which is exactly why she must surprise them. To wait, to arrange a parley through traditional diplomatic channels, would be to approach them as a supplicant. By appearing suddenly, she seizes the initiative. She dictates the terms of reality. It is a psychological gamble, risking her safety to project an image of absolute invincibility. She refuses a full escort. She takes only those closest to her, Vegeta, Avienda, and the Grey Sister Merilil, who has already been sent ahead. It is a calculated display of arrogance and confidence. To ride into an army of thousands with only 2 guards is to say, "I am so powerful, I do not need soldiers." They utilize the one power to travel, slicing a hole in reality. One moment they are in the warmth of the palace, and the next, they step through a gateway into the snowy silence of Brain Wood. The contrast is jarring, from the scent of beeswax and perfume to the biting cold of pine and frozen earth. They are soon intercepted. Shianaran soldiers, men of duty and discipline, with their top knots and heavy armour, emerge from the trees. Their presence is a reminder of the culture of the borderlands, hard men, shaped by their eternal war against the shadow in the blight. They escort Elaine to the command tent, a sprawling canvas cathedral amidst the snow. Inside, Elaine finds the 4 rulers. There is King Isar of Shianar, a man whose sad eyes have seen too much death. King Pytar of Arafel, aging but still possessing a rugged magnetic strength. Queen Ethaniel of Kandor, shrewd and motherly, and Queen Tenobia of Saldea. Tenobia is the wild card here, young, aggressive, flaunting jewels in a war camp, possessing a temperament that makes a blizzard seem mild. The negotiation that follows is a masterclass in Aes Sedai composure. Elaine refuses to be intimidated. She attacks first, verbally. She sits while they stand, forcing them to orient themselves around her. She calls out the elephant in the room. They are not here to invade Andor. They are here for the Dragon Reborn. It is a moment of profound tension. These rulers have marched their armies south, leaving the Blight, the very thing they are sworn to guard, undefended. This speaks to a desperation in the world. They believe the last battle is nigh, and they need to know where Rand al'Thor stands. They fear the prophecies. They fear the madness. They have come to demand answers. Elaine, maintaining the icy facade of the White Tower, admits nothing and everything. She confirms she knows Rand's location, but refuses to give it up easily. Instead, she maneuvers them. She offers them a direction, south, toward Morandi, but only if they agree to leave Andor immediately. It is a brilliant tactical stroke. By sending them to Morandi, she achieves 2 goals. First, she clears foreign armies from her own land, boosting her legitimacy as queen. Second, she uses these borderlanders as a hammer to intimidate her rebellious nobles in the south, likely without a single blow being struck. It is the essence of Days Daymar, the game of houses, using your potential enemies to defeat your actual enemies. The rulers agree. They are desperate to find the dragon, and Elaine has given them assent. Tenobia, fiery and demanding, insists she must also see her uncle, Davram Bashir, who rides with the dragon. The deal is struck. Bloodshed is avoided, and Elaine Trakand has turned a potential invasion into a political victory. But the cost of leadership is exhaustion. Upon her return to Caemlyn, Elaine is nearly collapsing, her body heavy with the fatigue of pregnancy and the stress of high-stakes diplomacy. Yet the wheel does not stop turning for the weary. No sooner has she returned than her first clerk, Halwyn Norrie, bombards her with new crises. More armies are approaching Caemlyn, rival claimants to the throne. Elaine cannot rest. She issues orders for food, for defense, for the inevitable siege. The chapter closes on a woman who has won the day, but must immediately brace for the night. Chapter 28. News in a cloth sack. We shift our gaze south to the sweltering, humid oppressiveness of Ebu Dar. Here the atmosphere is heavy not with snow, but with the stifling weight of occupation. The Seanchan have taken the city, and their rigid, alien order lies over the streets like a suffocating blanket. Matt Cauthon finds himself in a gilded cage. He is the guest and lover of Queen Tillin, a situation that is a complex knot of humour and horror. Tillin treats him with a possessive affection, calling him her pretty and her pigeon, while Matt, ever the rogue, finds himself outmanoeuvred and essentially collected like a prize. It is a dynamic that flips traditional gender roles in a way that makes Matt profoundly uncomfortable, highlighting his vulnerability despite his legendary luck. The morning brings a shift in the status quo. Tillin is departing. The Seanchan High Lady Suroth is taking the Queen on an aerial tour of her new domains aboard a towrakan, one of the terrifying flying beasts the Seanchan use for transport. The description of these creatures, leathery, reptilian, utterly unnatural to the eyes of the Westlands, reinforces the alien nature of the invaders. They have brought monsters out of legend to enforce their rule. Matt watches the departure with a mix of relief and anxiety. He is dressed in the gaudy red silks Tillin prefers, feeling ridiculous, a doll dressed up by its owner. As the Seanchan nobility and the Queen depart, the docks are a spectacle of disciplined power. The Seanchan efficiency is terrifying. People are property here, Dakavale, moving with eyes downcast, their spirits broken or leashed. With Tillin gone for a week, Matt sees his window of opportunity. He is not a man to stay trapped, and more importantly, he has debts to pay. There are Aes Sedai in this city, Teslin, Jolene, and Edicina, who are being held as damane, leashed human weapons. Matt has a deep-seated distrust of Aes Sedai, born of memories that are not his own and personal trauma, but his moral compass is rigid. He cannot leave them to be treated like dogs. He has promised to get them out, but Ebu Dar is a dangerous place to plan an escape. The city is crawling with listeners and spies. Paranoia is the currency of the day. Matt recruits allies, a motley crew of outcasts. There is Tom Merrilin, the gleeman whose cloak of patches hides the mind of a master spy and assassin. There is Julin Sandar, the Tyran thief-catcher, who is navigating his own romance with a former panarch reduced to a servant. And there is Noel Charin, an old man with gaps in his memory and a disturbing knowledge of geography and violence. A man who feels like a traveller from a different age. The tension ratchets up with the news of murders in the city. The Golem is back. This creature, a construct of the shadow made to kill channelers, is the ultimate predator. It squeezes through cracks in door frames. It drinks blood. It feels no pain. Its presence in the city turns the atmosphere from one of political oppression to survival horror. Matt knows the Golem is hunting him just as much as it is hunting the Aes Sedai. Every shadow in the street could be the monster. The Seanchan patrols are doubling. The seekers for truth, the secret police, are on high alert. The net is tightening. Matt's planning is frantic. He plays the fool, limping around the palace pretending to be the abandoned toy of the Queen, all while coordinating a complex heist. He needs to smuggle 3 women out of a city that watches everyone. Tom uses his contacts to forge documents, but they hit roadblocks at every turn. They need seals they cannot find. They need a way to walk women out who are chained by magic. Beslam, Tillin's son, adds another layer of danger. The young prince is hot-headed, eager to start an uprising against the Seanchan. He speaks of freedom and glory, but Matt, with the memories of 1,000 dead generals in his head, sees only slaughter. He knows that civilians with pitchforks cannot stand against the disciplined Seanchan war machine and their channeling damane. Matt finds himself in the role of the reluctant mentor, trying to talk Beslan down from a suicide mission that would see Ebu Dar burned to ash. The days tick by, agonizingly slow yet terrifyingly fast. The deadline of Tillin's return looms. The Golem strikes again and again, leaving bloodless corpses in the alleyways, ramping up the citywide panic. Matt is sleeping in stables, moving constantly, sweating not just from the heat, but from the sheer weight of the impossible task he has shouldered. Finally, a breakthrough comes. It does not come with a bang, but with a simple, quiet delivery. Julin Sandar enters the room with a cloth sack. Inside are the items that have been impossible to procure. 2 dresses to disguise the Aes Sedai, and an Aedam, the silver collar and leash used to control channelers. It is the key to the lock. With these items, they can employ the ultimate camouflage, hiding in plain sight. They will not sneak the women out as refugees, they will walk them out as prisoner and captor, using the Seanchan's own rigid hierarchy against them. The chapter ends on this note of grim satisfaction. The pieces are on the board. The plan is insane, dangerous, and relies on 1,000 things going right, but for a gambler like Matt Cauthon, those are the only odds worth playing. The dice are tumbling in his head, and it is time to toss them. The escape from Ebu Dar is about to begin. Chapter 29. Another plan. The atmosphere in the basement of the Wandering Woman is suffocating, a physical manifestation of the tightening noose around Matt Cauthon's neck. We find ourselves amidst the barrels and flickering oil lamps, where the shadows seem to carry as much weight as the stone walls. Here, Matt is attempting to orchestrate the impossible, the liberation of Aes Sedai from a city held by the Seanchan. But the tension in the room is not merely about the escape. It is a clash of wills, a friction between the arrogance of the White Tower and the pragmatic desperation of a gambler. Jolene Mazza, the Green Sister hiding within the inn, stands as a picture of restored dignity, her haggard appearance replaced by fine wool and lace. Yet her composure fractures when Matt presents his solution, an Aedam. The silver leash glints in the lamplight, a serpentine symbol of slavery that makes the Aes Sedai recoil. To ask a woman accustomed to wielding the one power to voluntarily wear the collar of a domain is to ask her to surrender her very soul. Jolene's refusal is absolute, backed by the silent, lethal menace of her 2 warders, Fen and Blarick. These men, though physically different, one Saldean, one Shienaran, move with a singular, synchronized intent, viewing Matt as lions might view a troublesome goat. It is Setale Anan, the innkeeper, who shatters the stalemate. There is a profound irony here. A woman with no apparent ability to channel, dressing down an Aes Sedai as if she were a petulant novice. Setale's ferocity hints at a strength and perhaps a history that goes beyond simple innkeeping. She demands Jolene accept the reality of their situation. Matt, hoping to soften the blow, reveals the scope of his ambition. He intends to rescue not just Jolene, but Teslin and Edicina as well. This revelation stuns Jolene. The idea that this rogue would risk everything for sisters who are not even his allies speaks to the core of Matt's character. He is the hero who vehemently denies his heroism, the man who grumbles about Aes Sedai while walking into fire to save them. The scene shifts to a technical, almost clinical examination of the Aedam. Matt, with his uncanny luck and dexterity, solves the puzzle of the latch mechanism. It is a moment that highlights his latent ability to understand instruments of war and control, a dark talent he often wishes he didn't possess. However, the plan fails catastrophically. When they clasp the collar around Jolene's neck, she does not become docile. She collapses in agony. It becomes painfully clear that without a woman capable of acting as a suldam, one who can link with the prisoner, the collar is merely a torture device. The escape plan, built on this disguise, lies in ruins. Retreating from the basement, Matt seeks a new angle, only to be intercepted by a ghost from his past. Bael Domon, the once proud Ileana smuggler, appears, but he is changed. Shorn of hair and beard, he is now Sojin, a hereditary upper servant to the Seanchan blood. This transformation serves as a chilling reminder of the Seanchan's cultural assimilation. They do not just conquer lands, they absorb people. Domon leads Matt to his mistress, Captain Igianin. The dynamic in the back room of the inn is fraught with political danger. Igianin, now raised to the lesser blood, is a woman of immense capability, yet she is terrified. The seekers for truth, the Seanchan secret police, are circling her. We see here the fragility of power within the empire. Even the conquerors live in fear of their own surveillance state. Matt, ever the gambler, spots the opening. He needs Suldam to facilitate his escape. Igianin needs a way to smuggle herself out of the reach of the seekers. It is a negotiation at the edge of a knife. Matt leverages his knowledge of her vulnerability, and a bargain is struck. He will help her vanish if she provides the women necessary to control the Adam. Back with Tom and Julin, the gravity of their secrets weighs heavily. They discuss the male Adam, a terrifying artifact intended to control the dragon reborn, which they help dispose of in Tanchico. This conversation serves a dual purpose. It reminds us of the global stakes involving Rand al'Thor and highlights the power of information. Tom, the master bard, understands that rumours can be as destructive as armies. If the world believed the dragon was a puppet of the tower, or worse, enslaved, hope would shatter. As the chapter closes, Matt lies in Tillin's bed, unable to sleep, staring into the dark. The dice are tumbling in his head, and the weight of the coming dawn presses down on him. Chapter 30. Cold, fat raindrops. The day of the escape breaks with an omen, a storm rolling off the sea of storms. The weather is a mirror of the mood in Ebu Dar, grey, turbulent and unforgiving. Robert Jordan often uses weather not just as a backdrop, but as a participant in the narrative, and here the cold, fat raindrops serve to isolate the characters, washing away the normal rhythms of the city and creating a chaotic canvas for their departure. Matt moves through the Tarasin Palace with a singular focus, shedding the trappings of Tylin's toy. We see the preparations through the lens of logistics and farewells. His servants, Lopin and Nerim, are dispatched with the horses, while the young boy Olva packs his belongings. There is a touching poignancy in Olva's actions. Amidst the danger, he prioritizes his game of snakes and foxes. To the boy, the game is a constant in a life of upheaval, a subtle parallel to the deadly game Matt is playing with the Seanchan. Matt's interaction with Olva reinforces his role as a reluctant father figure, trying to preserve a shred of innocence in a world of wolves. The tension ratchets up as Matt deals with Beslan. The Prince of Altara is eager for violence, his pride stung by the occupation. He wants a grand, bloody gesture, a rebellion in the streets. Matt, however, is a soldier who understands the difference between bravery and suicide. He manipulates Beslan's anger into a distraction, convincing him to set fires near the Seanchan stores rather than engaging in a hopeless brawl. It is a moment of maturity for Matt. He is managing the chaos, directing the players on the board to ensure the survival of his own pieces. As the day drags on, the psychological toll of the wait becomes evident. Matt watches the Damane in the exercise yard. He sees Teslin, her spirit seemingly broken, stumbling in the wind. The sight creates a knot of anxiety in his stomach. If the Aes Sedai have lost the will to fight, his plan might fail before it even begins. He is banking on their desire for freedom, but the Seanchan conditioning is a powerful, eroding force. Night falls, absolute and impenetrable. The storm has extinguished the street lamps, turning Ebu Dar into a void. Matt waits in the dark of Tylin's apartments, the ticking of the clock sounding like the heartbeat of a dying man. This sensory deprivation heightens the suspense. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the casement could be the arrival of the golem or the Death Watch guards. He checks his knives by feel, a ritual of survival. He is no longer the farm boy from the Two Rivers. He is a dangerous man in the dark, ready to kill to protect his own. Finally, the moment of action arrives. Matt steps out into the rain-lashed stable yard. The visibility is near zero, the world reduced to the sound of drumming water. Then, figures emerge from the gloom. Hygienin has kept her word, but she has altered the deal. She arrives not just with the Suldam, Seta and Renna, but with the entire group from the inn, including Setale Anan and the warders. Hygienin's presence changes the dynamic immediately. She takes command, criticising Vanin's manners and asserting control over the reluctant Suldam. The revelation of the Suldam's identities, Seta and Renna, is a significant lore callback. These are women who have tasted the bitterness of being on the other end of the leash during the events at Falm. Their fear is palpable, but they are bound by Hygienin's authority and their own desperate circumstances. The chapter concludes with the group assembled in the pouring rain, a motley collection of soldiers, nobles, servants and channelers. The plan has mutated, swelled by additional bodies and complexities, but the anchor is lifted. Matt Cauthon, dripping wet and armed with nothing but his wits and his luck, is finally in motion. The waiting is over. The dice have stopped rolling, and now they must play the hand they have been dealt. Chapter 31. What the Elfin said. The escape from the Tarasin Palace unfolds not with the thunder of battle, but with the suffocating tension of a breath held too long. Mat Cauthon, a man who would prefer the rattle of dice to the machinations of empires, finds himself shepherding a chaotic flock through the dimly lit, tapestry-lined corridors of Ebu Dar. The atmosphere is thick with the unspoken threat of the Seanchan occupiers, a pressure that weighs heavily on the Suldam, Renna, and Seta, who follow with eyes cast down, cowed by the presence of Aegianin and Domon. Mat, ever the reluctant hero, peels away from the group under the pretense of a minor errand. It is a quintessential moment of Cauthon character study. He grumbles about responsibilities and women who take charge, all while risking his neck to perform an act of unsung mercy. He ascends to the sprawling attic, a maze of wooden rooms and pale shadows. Here, he locates a windfinder of the Atha Mir, Nestel din Sakura. In the pitch blackness, a pact is struck. Mat offers freedom, and the seafolk woman, whose spirit had been teetering on the edge of breaking under the collar, finds a renewed, ferocious resolve. Mat's luck, that tangible force that bends the pattern around him, holds true as he manipulates the Adam collar, granting her a chance to liberate her kin. It is a quiet act of rebellion against the dehumanizing machinery of the Seanchan Empire. However, the pattern weaves complexities Mat cannot foresee. Upon leaving the attic, he stumbles upon Aegianin and the others, who have already secured the Aes Sedai Teslin and Edessina. The situation is precarious, a house of cards ready to collapse at a breath. Trusting Aegianin to handle the volatile mix of captors and captives, Mat retreats, his mind racing toward his final obligation, Tylin. He expects a quick departure, but fate, as always, has a sense of irony. Tylin has returned early, the Queen of Altara caught in the act of unbuttoning her dress. The dynamic between them crackles with its usual strange intensity, predatory affection on her part, the wildered resignation on his. Tylin, ever the pragmatist and survivor, realizes that for Mat to escape without implicating her and bringing down the wrath of the High Blood upon Altara, she must appear to be a victim. In a scene that blurs the lines between political maneuvering and their intricate personal history, she insists Mat bind and gag her. She plays the Game of Thrones even from beneath her own bed, ensuring her survival by orchestrating her own defeat. Mat leaves her there, a pet fox escaping the trap, feeling a pang of genuine loss for the woman who was as much a captor as a lover. The escape reaches its crescendo in the anteroom near the stables. The rain falls in sheets outside, a black curtain over the night. Mat's luck runs headlong into the most dangerous obstacle yet, Tuon herself. The daughter of the Nine Moons stands before him, not as a fragile royal, but as a lethal combatant. When Mat attempts to silence her, she explodes into motion, a tiny dynamo of hand-to-hand violence that nearly overwhelms him. It takes the intervention of the grizzled wanderer Noel Charin to subdue her. As the scattered members of Mat's party, Juilin, Thera, Aegianin and the others, converge, the full horror of the situation dawns on the Seanchan noblewoman. Aegianin collapses in terror, realizing they have laid hands on the heir to the Crystal Throne, an act punishable by death by torture. But Mat, staring at the captive Tuon, realizes the terrifying truth of the Elfin's prophecy from so long ago. The answers he received through the twisted red doorway were literal. He looks at the High Lady, the woman who ordered armies and commanded the blood, and speaks the words that seal his fate. She is my wife. The declaration hangs in the air, shattering the reality of everyone present. Even Tuon, bound and gagged, smiles with a secret, terrifying knowledge. The die is cast, and the gambler has made the highest stake of his life. Chapter 32. A Portion of Wisdom. The narrative shifts geographically and tonally to the grey, damp oppression of Far Madding. Here, the One Power is absent, blocked by the city's ancient guardian, reducing the dragon reborn to merely a man with a sword and a troubled mind. Rand al'Thor sits in the Golden Wheel Inn, nursing mulled wine and frustration. The psychological toll of the city is evident. For a channeler, the silence of the true source is a phantom limb ache, a constant reminder of vulnerability. Lews Theron's voice in his head is a jagged counterpoint to his own thoughts, railing against the cage of the city, screaming for the release of the power. Rand is hunting the renegade Asherman, Kisman, Torval and Gedwin, who tried to assassinate him. He is driven by a hard, cold desperation, listening to the banal chatter of merchants for clues. The world outside moves on. Rumours of the Seanchan pushing into Ilion and the Stone of Tyr under siege filter through the common room, reminding Rand that the last battle approaches inexorably while he plays detective in the rain. He takes to the streets, the weather mirroring his internal gloom. It is here that he encounters Verin Mathwin. The Brown sister plays the part of the eccentric, distracted aunt to perfection, standing in the rain as if unaware of the cold. Yet her words are sharp and precise. She confirms the Seanchan advance and offers Rand a crucial piece of advice, or perhaps a directive. He must make peace with Cadsuane Malathrin. Verin, possessing a wisdom that looks past pride, urges Rand to see Cadsuane not as an antagonist, but as a necessary advisor. It is a lesson in humility for the Dragon Reborn, to accept that he cannot navigate the end of the age alone, and that even the most abrasive guidance may be the most valuable. Returning to his own inn, the Council's head, Rand finds Lan Mandragoran. The bond between Warder and Aes Sedai, and the bond of friendship between these two men, serves as a grounding force. The women, Nynaeve, Min and Olivia, return from a riding excursion with Cadsuane. It is revealed that the ride was a diplomatic mission of sorts. Nynaeve and Min are trying to bridge the gap between Rand and the formidable Aes Sedai. The scene highlights the resourcefulness of Rand's allies. Nynaeve reveals she has learned to use one of her Terangrial, a well, which stores a small amount of the One Power, a game-changer in a city where channeling is impossible. It is a spark of hope in the damp gloom, but the tension ratchets up when Min receives a letter. The bond between her and Rand flashes with anxiety. It is an anonymous note, written in a spidery hand, revealing the exact location of the renegade Asherman, a room above a bootmaker on Blue Carp Street. The chapter closes with the weight of inevitability. The hunt has a direction now. The predator has been given the scent. Rand, armed with this intelligence and the reluctant wisdom that he must eventually face Cadsuane, prepares to move. The claustrophobic suspense of Far Madding is about to break, and the violence Rand has been holding back is ready to be unleashed. The clock on the mantel rings, counting down the hours of a peace that is already shattering. Chapter 33. Blue Carp Street. The air in Far Madding hangs heavy with dampness and unspoken threats, a fitting atmosphere for the tension coiling within the room on Blue Carp Street. We find Min Farshaw balancing on the edge of a bed, her agitation manifesting in the idle, restless flick of a throwing knife across her knuckles. It is a sharp contrast to the man she watches. Rand al'Thor sits with a terrifying stillness, studying his sword, the metallic dragons on his hands glinting like a promise of violence. There is a profound psychological dissonance here. Min, full of warmth and human fear, quotes proverbs about the foolishness of walking into traps. Rand, however, has retreated into that cold, hard place he believes is necessary for survival. He is not merely brave, he is becoming emotionally calcified, a stone that feels no fear because it feels nothing at all. He knows the renegade Asharman are waiting for him, yet he reasons that knowing of a trap allows one to spring it safely. It is the logic of a desperate man, or perhaps a man who has accepted that death walks beside him constantly. When Nynaeve, Lan and Olivia arrive, the dynamic shifts. Nynaeve, stripped of her one power by the city's guardian, relies on a different kind of strength, her trust in Lan, though her Aes Sedai mask of cool porcelain barely hides her worry. Lan, the uncrowned king of the Malkiri, is grim acceptance personified. They prepare to walk into the jaws of the beast, not as heroes seeking glory, but as executioners doing what must be done. The streets of Far Madding are slick with rain, a labyrinth of slate roofs and narrow alleys. Rand moves with the grace of a predator, scouting the bootmaker's shop where his enemies hide. He spots Torval and Gedwin, the traitors, entering the building. But the true horror of this encounter lies in the subversion of expectations. Nynaeve uses her well, a belt functioning as a battery for the One Power, to lift Rand and Lan to the rooftops. They descend through the attic, silent as shadows, only to find the trap has already been sprung by a third party. The renegade Asherman, the bait, are already dead, their bodies swollen and blackened. The mastermind reveals himself not as a channeler, but as the embodiment of corruption itself. Padden Faile, the shadow that has stalked the Emond's Fielders since the beginning, steps from the gloom. The wounds in Rand's side, the old one from Ishamael and the new one from Faine's dagger, resonate in agony, a physical manifestation of the light and dark warring within his flesh. Faile is manic, a creature of rabid hatred, accompanied by the fallen nobleman Torum Riartin. A chaotic melee erupts. Lan engages Torum in a Blademaster's dance of death, while Rand, fighting through blinding pain and the screaming voice of Luz Therin in his head, pursues Faile. But the slippery, corrupted creature flees. The skirmish ends with Toram dead and Faile gone, but the noise has summoned the city guard. In a desperate bid to escape, Rand and Lan scramble across the slick slate roof. Fate, however, is cruel. Lan slips. Rand catches him, dangling over a fatal drop, but his grip fails. They plummet into the alleyway, darkness rushing up to meet them. Chapter 34. The Hummingbird's Secret. The perspective shifts to the street below, where Nynaeve watches the chaos unfold with helpless horror. A tide of street guards floods the alley, swarming over the fallen men. Before she can recklessly expose herself, she is seized by Cadsuane and Olivia. There is a harsh lesson here in command and necessity. Cadsuane, the legendary Aes Sedai of the Green Ajah, knows that getting captured alongside the Dragon Reborn serves no purpose. She drags a protesting Nynaeve away, preserving their only chance to negotiate. We are then taken into the claustrophobic darkness of Rand's consciousness. He wakes in a stone cell, stripped of his boots and gloves. But the physical confinement is nothing compared to the psychological terror. He is in a box. The trauma of Dumai's Wells crashes down upon him. The darkness presses in, and the voice of Luz Therin Telemon begins to howl in shared panic. To keep the madness at bay, to keep from shattering, Rand recites his litany of the dead. He lists the names of the women who have died for him: Moiraine, Colliver, Leah. It is a masochistic ritual, a way to harden his soul, forging himself into steel to endure the unendurable. He believes he must be harder, ever harder, tragically mistaking emotional numbness for strength. Meanwhile, Cadsuane prepares her counterstroke. She assembles a strange retinue: the Aes Sedai, the 3 bonded Ashaman, and the fiercely unpredictable Olivia. They march upon the hall of the councils, not with force of arms, but with the terrifying weight of authority. Cadsuane confronts Alais, the first council, who attempts to stonewall her. The council believes they are safe within the Guardian's shield, safe from the One Power. Cadsuane shatters this illusion with a calculated display of dominance. She reveals that the Guardian has a flaw, a barn door, as the Ashaman Damer calls it. Utilising her own well, the golden hummingbird ornament in her hair, and signalling Nynaeve to use hers, they channel. It is a moment of pure political theatre. Cadsuane lifts the coronet from the first council's head with flows of air, suspending it before the terrified assembly. The message is undeniable. Your protection is a lie. We can touch you. The council's resistance crumples instantly. Cadsuane has broken the ruler of the city, sacrificing the woman's dignity to secure Rand's freedom. It is a cold, ruthless act, performed not for glory, but because she has promised to protect the boy, no matter the cost to others, or to herself. Chapter 35. With the Choden Cowl. The air was frigid as Rand al'Thor rode away from Far Madding, a cold that had less to do with the winter winds misting his breath, and more to do with the icy fortress he had built around his own heart. He crossed the stone bridge with the dragon's peace signed and sealed, leaving the city that had served as a temporary sanctuary, a place where the One Power could not reach him and where he had found a brief, quiet humanity. But for a weapon to be useful, it cannot remain in the forge forever. It must be drawn. Rand was that weapon now, forged steel, emotionally distant even as Min rode close enough to touch him, her worry vibrating through the bond they shared. He felt gratitude toward the city, but it was a distant, hollow thing. He was already preparing himself for the storm. As they ascended into the forested hills, leaving the dampening field of the city behind, the true source returned to Rand's senses. It was a sudden, violent presence, pulsing at the corner of his vision. To a man who can channel, the tainted male half of the power, Seidin, is a paradox of agony and ecstasy, a hunger like starvation. Without conscious thought, Rand reached out and filled the emptiness within him. It hit him like an avalanche of fire and ice, slick with the oily corruption of the Dark One. This was the burden every male channeler carried, the necessity to embrace the very thing that was rotting their minds, fighting a war for survival every time they drew breath to weave the power. They arrived at a nondescript patch of forest, indistinguishable to ordinary eyes, but blazing like a beacon to Rand. Here, buried beneath the mulch, lay the dragon's secret. With flows of air, he unearthed the bundle containing Kalandor, the crystal sword, a sa'angreal of immense power, but one that lacked a buffer, leaving its user open to the madness and vulnerable to being forced. It was a dangerous artifact, a flag announcing his presence to the world, but today, danger was the point. The gathered company was a strange tapestry of the alliances Rand had cobbled together. Aes Sedai, who had sworn fealty, Seafolk Windfinders, Asherman, and the formidable Cadsuane Maladrin. When Rand announced his intention, the silence was absolute. He was not simply going to wield the power, he intended to cleanse it. He would remove the taint from the male half of the source. It was a proclamation of madness, or divinity. To the Aes Sedai, particularly the scholarly Nessun, the idea was terrified absurdity. The access keys to the Choden Kal were powerful enough to crack the world like an egg. But Rand's logic was the brutal calculus of survival. The Asherman were already going mad. The last battle approached. If he did not try, the world was doomed to be defended by insane men. The location for this cosmic surgery was Shadar Logoth. The choice was a stroke of intuitive genius, or perhaps a gift from the mad voice of Luz Therin Telamon echoing in Rand's mind. Shadar Logoth was a city consumed by its own evil, Mashadar, an evil born of suspicion and hatred that was distinct from and opposed to the Dark One's evil. Rand intended to use this polarity. He would force the taint through a conduit of Saidar, effectively scrubbing the filth against the evil of the city, letting the two hatreds annihilate one another. On a bleak, stony hilltop north of the cursed ruins, the preparations began. Nynaeve Almira, the former wisdom of Eamon's Field, sat before him. She was the only Aes Sedai he trusted implicitly, the only one he would allow to link with him for this task. They utilised the access keys, two statues, male and female, which connected them to the colossal Chodan Kal statues half a world away. As they linked, the sensation was overwhelming. For Rand, it was a surrender. He had to guide the flows, but he also had to submit to the foreign sensation of Saidar, the female half of the power. To him, Saidar felt like a tranquil river, but one with treacherous currents that threatened to drown him, a sharp contrast to the chaotic battle he fought against Seidin. Together, they wove the conduit. It did not look like a tube, but rather a flower of Saidar, a complex geometry of spirit and power. Through this feminine construct, Rand began to pump the raw, raging torrent of Seidin, driving the taint directly into the heart of Shadar Logoth. The reaction was immediate. The beacon was lit. The sheer volume of the one power being drawn was felt by every channeler across the continent. To the Forsaken, the chosen of the Dark One, this was a siren call they could not ignore. They travelled to the site, driven by fear, curiosity, and the orders of the Great Lord. The defence of the hilltop fell to Cadsuane and the mixed guard of warders and Aes Sedai. It became a frantic, scattered battle through the woodlands. Demandred, the brilliant general of the Shadow, arrived expecting to crush a chaotic rabble, only to find himself stalemated by the raw strength of Daemon Flynn, an old man who had become an Asharman. It was a jarring realization for the Forsaken. The ignorant peasants of this age had learned to fight. Elsewhere in the woods, the tragedy of the battle unfolded. Eben Hopwill, a young and eager Asharman, found himself face to face with a woman of stunning beauty. But as she struck, the horror of the situation revealed itself. She was channeling Seidin. This was Arimgar, the reincarnated Balthamel, a man's soul in a woman's body. Eben died shouting the warning, a final act of loyalty that allowed his bonded Aes Sedai to avenge him, though the creature escaped. Through it all, Rand sat immobile, a statue of concentration. Inside his mind he was screaming. The taint was not merely a stain, it was a living ocean of filth, and he was channeling it all. He was a funnel for the corruption of thousands of years. The pressure was unimaginable. He walked the razor's edge of sanity, the dual wounds in his side, one from the Dark One, one from the Shadar Logoth dagger, throbbing in counterpoint, physically manifesting the metaphysical war he was waging. Above Shadar Logoth, a dome of blackness began to grow. It was not merely dark, it was the absence of light, a massive sphere of negation that swelled as the taint poured into the city, consumed by the waiting hunger of Mashadar. The city and the taint fed upon each other, a cannibalistic frenzy of energies that defied the laws of physics. The Forsaken, seeing the titanic forces at play and facing the organised resistance of Cadsuane's forces, began to flee or die. Osangar, hiding and plotting to use balefire, was vaporised by Elza, a black sister who believed she was serving the Dark One by ensuring the dragon survived to the last battle. A twisted irony that saved Rand's life. On the hilltop, the climax was silent and devastating. The female access key, unable to withstand the strain any longer, grew hot and then shattered, melting into a lump of slag. The connection broke. The black dome over Shadar Logoth imploded, vanishing with a roar that seemed to suck the sound out of the world. Silence reclaimed the forest. The city of Shadar Logoth was gone, leaving only a massive, scooped-out crater in the earth. The taint that had driven men mad for 3,000 years, that had broken the world and ended the Age of Legends, was no more. Rand lay unconscious, collapsed from an exhaustion that went deeper than bone. But as the survivors gathered, Dama Flynn and Johanna Rishma reached out to the source. The fire, the ice, the power was there, but the oil was gone. The sickness had vanished. It was clean. The wind blew across the fragments of the broken Terangrial, and though the dragon slept, the world had fundamentally shifted. The time of the breaking was finally, truly over.